Mercy TV, quarterly meeting of the OMMP. Here's the schedule so far.
Just found out this morning. Good morning, this is Laird.
Hey, Laird.
Morning, Laird.
Morning.
What color are your shoes?
For the record, I'm purple today.
Okay, thank you.
He wears
Beard's back.
Hey, Greg.
Good morning. You're here.
It's inside the folder.
Oh. Okay.
So, is everyone set over on the staff side there?
Yes,
You guys are all set?
yes.
Well, I guess we'll begin. All right, welcome everyone to the September 9th Advisory Committee on Medical Marijuana. This is our regular quarterly meeting. And we will begin with some introductions, starting from Sarah. Lauren, just introduce yourself.
Sarah Bennett. I am a caregiver, grower, patient advocate, founder, director of Human Collective, a medical marijuana facility in Oregon since 2010. I'm proud to be certified in ACMM.
I'm Ben McNamara, and I'm a grower, a patient, and a caregiver.
Cheryl Smith, Executive Director of Compassion Center in Eugene and a patient advocate.
Brian Michaels, I'm an attorney who does a lot of this work around the state, located in Eugene.
Todd Delato, Chair of the Advisory Committee, also Chair of the ACMM's Horticulture Research and Safety Committee. I'm President of CAN Research in Corvallis, Oregon, specializing in horticultural research of cannabis and business and public policy consulting.
I'm Jim Clark. I'm from Brookings, Oregon. I'm a patient, caregiver, and grower. Represent patients is a priority.
I'm Sandy Burbank. I'm from Mosier, Oregon. I'm the Executive Director of Mothers Against Misuse and Abuse for 30 years. And we have 3 clinics. I'm also the co-chair of the Outreach Committee.
Alice Ivany, patient advocate.
Laird. Laird, introduce yourself.
Good morning again. Laird, Williams, Oregon, and glad to be here on whatever day.
I'm Maureen Russell. I'm a program analyst for the OMMP. Your minutes. Tawana Nichols, the section manager for the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program.
I'm Aaron Kossel, I'm also a program analyst for the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program.
I'm Joe Carlson. I'm a interim unit manager for Tawana Nichols. Dave Leland, interim administrator for the Center for Health Protection.
Okay.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and audience members can introduce yourself if you like to. Lauren.
Okay. My name is Michelle Vickery.
I'm her father, Samuel, both advocates, growers, patients.
I'm Wayne Haythorne. I work with Mothers Against Misuse and Abuse.
I'm Kayla Cadell. I'm a student at U of O, and I'm interning at the Compassion Center in Eugene.
Jerry Price, Cascadia Labs in Bend, Oregon.
Jeremy Sackett, as well as Cascadia Labs in Bend, Oregon.
I'm Jeremy Quinn. I'm also a sort of Bend, Oregon Australian Research Center.
I'm Patrick Devlin. I'm an interested party.
I'm Larry Day. This is my wife Sharon. The former director for Oregon Normal State of Jefferson chapter down in Medford, and former director, operations manager for Voter Power. Longtime advocate, activist.
Hi, I'm Steve Bennett. I'm a patient and a grower.
I'm Noah Sternthal. I'm a patient and a grower.
I'm Tom Burns with the OHA Director's Office.
Hi, I'm Amanda Reiman. I'm with Drug Policy Alliance, and I'm going to be your guest speaker later this afternoon.
I'm PK from Mercy TV, patient, grower, and concerned citizen.
Larry Lacey from Josephine County. I also have a Compassion Center in Grants Pass.
Anthony Taylor, Director of Compassion in Oregon and lobbyist.
Well, thank you. Our members, Jerry Lehrberger is absent, not excused, and Andrew Dorfman is excused absence today. Great, so we'll start by meeting minutes from June 14th. Does anyone have any suggested changes for those minutes?
I had many changes that I sent to Tawana, and I don't know if any of them got incorporated.
Is that the June 14th?
That's both sets of
both,
minutes.
okay.
I didn't view the ones that were printed. I believe they have been incorporated.
There's so many changes that I don't see what I can do here without wasting a lot of time, and that has to do with what I'm going to talk about later, because I think our minutes really need to be worked on, professionalized a lot. So I'm not sure how you want to handle that.
Okay, yeah, I got your comments about the July 29th, and I totally agree. And but yeah, if you feel like that week, the June 14th, I think we could.
Do you see, was anything reflected in these?
I was trying to go through them and see. I don't have all my changes here. I was trying to see if I could see some of the problems in here. I see one, but I know that on the June meetings, I just gave up at a certain, about 3/4 of the way through. I completely edited the special meeting minutes. So
I have those edits. I sent it to the person who was taking the meeting with them.
I suspect these have been edited because they seem shorter than what they were before.
Okay, so she must have accepted the changes.
Okay.
Could we maybe wait to approve these until we can see what Cheryl sent? Maybe Cheryl, you could send it to all of us and we can look at it.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Be happy to.
Okay, so we'll table the approval of the meeting minutes for our June 14th regular meeting, as well as tabling the minute approval for July 29th special meeting till next meeting. Okay, so now we'll move on to program reports.
Yep. Thank you. So personnel, we are currently, we have 27 permanent employees and 1 temp employee. We filled most of our vacant positions. We currently have only 1 position left to fill, and that's this section manager's assistant. I do have Joe Carlson, as you heard, he's the interim unit manager for a short period of time. So that's where we are with personnel. And Aaron wants to speak to the statistics.
Yeah. So as of this morning, there are 58,055 Oregon medical marijuana program patients.
We currently have 29,093 unique caregivers. When we say unique, we mean if you caregiver for more than one patient, you're not counted twice. So there are 29,093 caregivers in the program, 43,689 growers. Caveat that on registrations where the patient lists him or herself as a grower, there are 33,007, and number of patients who list someone else as a grower is 27,998. There are currently 1,530 physicians for the current patients on the program. Then we also, in terms of out-of-state participants, there are 925 patients, 393 caregivers, and 392 growers. That's stats as of today.
So I provided you with the budget for the end of biennium 13 and then the beginning of biennium 15. And in the first month, we brought in revenue of $1 million, and then our cash balance moved over from the 40 and was 4,205, and now we're at 5,118,000. Sarah, if you want the copies of the budget, we do have some copies.
We'll get those made and put out on the table.
That's all I have on the budget.
Okay. Sandy?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not good at reading this kind of thing fast. Can you tell us how much we paid to run the program this quarter and how much we paid to run the OHA programs? And then when I'm seeing that we have, is it 4 or 5, I'm not sure, $4.2 million, is that right, left?
That was the end of the year's, the cash balance.
So we have that much right now at the end of June?
At the end of June, it was the 4,200.
How much is it now?
That was last year's.
That was the end of that was the last year's.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Currently, the cash balance is, the 5,000.
5 million?
5,180,000.
Okay, so it's 5.1 million is, I want to be sure that that was right. That's after we paid all the expenses to run the OMMP and paid our debt to the Oregon Health Authority for the extra programs.
Yes, the
Can you tell
end was the 4.2, was the end, that was after everything. This 5.1 doesn't reflect any transfer because we're not transferring any now. So the end was the 4.2. That's what was the end cash balance.
And when was that?
That's the end of June.
The end of June. This is September. Okay.
So what you see now from July, I don't have August yet. So now what you see now in July is 5.1.
Okay, can you tell me how much money we paid to the Oregon Health Authority in addition to the cost of running the OMMP?
So if you look at your,
it's hard to tell, Liz.
Okay. So it'll say transfer. It's on the back page.
The back page, okay. I got it. Transfers, got it.
And the total was 7.5.
Okay, how come I can't tell?
It's all the way to right.
It's the
Under
last column for the total, and it's the second to the bottom. It says transfer.
Okay, and that transfer was what went to the OHA for those programs?
Went to those programs, yes.
7.5.
Okay, and then this much money that's left is what's left after we paid to run all the expenses for the OMMP, and we've given this money. We still have almost $5 million left, or 4.2 at least.
Yes, that's what we have cash balance at the end of the financial.
Just trying to make sure everybody understands that. Thank you.
So what I'm to imply from this financial report is that the legislature didn't transfer any of our funds to the general fund from the legislative session, or do you know that yet?
I don't have that answer.
Okay. So yeah, it's just amazing that the legislative session ended 2 months ago, but we still haven't found out if there was a bill passed to affect our.
It takes a long time. Yeah, in fact, the books don't close on the biennium until December.
But didn't we find out right away last year that they were increasing the fees that people were paying? I just don't recall this, what, lagging time?
Yeah.
Because at this
That's
time,
probably
2 years
true.
ago, the Rules Advisory Committee was meeting to adjust the fees.
Yeah, because it was a fee adjustment thing, yeah, that's why.
Right, and I would assume that if the fees changed by the legislature, that would be, we would either be having a separate rulemaking or it would be included in this.
That's different than just closing the books.
Well, I'm happy if they just leave our money alone, but just wanted to know.
Just kind of warning everybody, books aren't closed on the biennium until December.
But at the same time, we're not making monthly payments to the other programs.
But will be.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, it'll, those things, the other thing that has kind of a slow start is the beginning of the subsequent biennium, because it's a huge accounting shift over from last biennium to this biennium. And so, you can't really look at July. July is incomplete. So, but once we get into August and September, it'll look.
Okay, as our
Will be more realistic.
statutory mandate gives us the right to input information on the fees, and we have passed a motion 3 different times unanimously that we would like information from the program, as we have gotten in the past, on how much money it takes to run the program and how much money is in excess, which we kind of got an answer, 4 million plus.
Yeah.
So
It's in that ballpark.
we would really like this to be firmed up. We've never really gotten that kind of directive because we would like to recommend, as we've said why, if you've read those motions several times, that we could lower the fees. And yet we're not giving an opportunity to take part in that process. And I'm very concerned about that. I keep wondering when I come to meeting after meeting and do all this work in between, if the work I'm doing counts for anything, and if it does, and we passed 3 motions, and we still don't have any information about how much we could lower the fees and still break even, which should be a pretty simple process, and we're not getting it. We're getting stonewalled, we're getting no cooperation, and I wonder if any of the work that we do matters. I mean, I'm really having a hard time with this. This is the 4th meeting we've had since our motion passed that we wanted this information, which we have gotten time and time again in the past. But all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, nothing.
We'd like an answer.
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
response.
we have an answer.
Okay. Is that, well, what was the response?
There was one point you guys motioned, and I think we can look back at those motions, that I said if Todd would provide me with what you were looking for, because you had asked that we get something from our program support manager saying, given how the revenue could be used differently. And there were several conversations about that, but I never got the questions because you didn't give me the specific.
Well, were you here
question
when
of the
we
plan.
lowered the fees before, Tawana? Was that?
I came in like right at the middle of it.
Okay, well, several times we looked at this over the years. It's not like it just started, and I know we've done it since you've been here, even though we haven't lowered fees. At one point, we got a recommendation, says how much we need, this is how much we got left over. We could actually lower the fees to $55. Well, that didn't last very long. Pretty soon they went up to 100 again because we didn't have enough money. So what we need to know is how much does it take to run the OMMP, how much does it take to meet our debt, and how much money is left over. I know we have to have a 6-month projection, but this is a lot more that needs to be projected for 6 months. And I just feel like even your answer is almost a runaround because we've been very clear. How much does it take to run it? How much can we lower the fees? Why are we building up this huge excess on the back of sick and
Poor.
dying and a lot of them poor people?
Well, you guys said something about having a plan, and then you didn't come into these specific questions. You spoke about having a plan, a good, clear plan of how that money was going to be used and how to lower the fees. And I never got you guys' direct questions, and then we spoke about it differently, and you guys submitted that proposal in which Dave took, went to legislative, and last meeting, we provided you with what that proposal was. Am I correct? We had the proposal from the last meeting.
Well,
well,
I would just, I guess I would just say, you know, you can look here and you can see that the cash balance is staying about the same, right?
Way more
It's
than
it's about $4 million.
It's sitting there waiting to be sold.
There's three, I see 3 in a row here in the last biennium. That's about $4 million.
Yeah, our eyes were popping out when it got to 2.4 million over a year ago. And now it's 5, because
Well, yeah, at some point, I think we know kind of what we can do.
And I think that the last proposal that we passed here was that we could see very clearly that the cash balance is far in excess of what's needed, and that a significant fee reduction is apparent. But we needed to have a good financial report in order for us to give recommendations on exactly what fee proposal structure, what fee structure we have. But if you just let me finish, the missing piece is, well, we are very happy that Jeff Carlson provided us a report that we used for a proposal for the legislature. But we've been asking and expecting Jeff to show up at meetings to answer questions. Chris Grorud did an excellent job of that when he was working for this program. He showed up at almost every one of our meetings, had a very thoughtful report. He answered questions effectively, and he gave us the information that we needed to give you good advice on fee reductions. And it happened. We did have fee reductions when it was necessary. There was fiscal responsibility of not letting the cash balance get too high. And we just want that attention back. We want Jeff Carlson attending these meetings to answer our questions so that we can do our job in giving you annual input on the fee structure.
One thing, I just wanted to add one thing. We already know what happens to this money. We had $10,000 stolen from it first, and that went into the into DHS budget. The next time it was almost $1 million, and that went into the general fund. We're really surprised that this hasn't disappeared in increments, that it's building up. But obviously, the fees could be lowered. The change fees are crippling all kinds of really poor people. They can't, it's just, this is ridiculous.
So okay, Cheryl.
I just needed one more clarification. Do we even know whether we're still having to give money to the other OHA programs?
Yes.
I thought that was a 2-year thing.
We know that.
We do know that, okay. Same level?
Yeah.
Was that official action? Because I only know that the one bill was passed for a biennium, and that's almost over, and now it's just continuing on?
We'll know that when we'll have section level legislatively approved budget information later this month.
Thank you.
So-
Will it be forwarded to us?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the ACMM?
Yeah.
Okay.
You anecdotally, I'm sorry.
Jerry.
You mentioned that there's only one thing missing here. And listening to this dialogue, I'd say there are several things missing here. It's kind of like having more equations, more unknowns than equations. So there are a few things missing here. One, I think we should be all overjoyed about that there is money in the bank. How many people are going to really get upset about that? Do we know how it's going to be spent? No, not exactly. I hear some uncertainty on the state level. I see uncertainty on the board in terms of making proposals about how that money is to be spent. What I'm also missing would be input. Is the state open in terms of how that money will be spent? Can this board make different recommendations? If so, I would feel very happy with that answer, because I feel in part we've dropped the ball in not making other recommendations in terms of how to spend such a gift that's sitting in the bank. Is it all ours? No, it's not. Is it all the state's? No. But what we're missing, I believe, are some sound recommendations. And part of that is our work in terms of how this money would be allocated if we had a choice. And the other thing that is missing is, do we have that choice? Is there a receptivity to input? And if there is, I see that as a win-win.
Did you ask a question? Can you restate your question?
Can I restate the question? Yes. Is the state receptive to input from this board on how that money will be managed and spent? Or a portion of that
Well, I
money?
think the answer is sure. You know, because, you know, we're authorized by the legislature to collect fees at a certain level and to also expend at a particular level. And so if those things diverge, you know, certainly there can be a fee reduction. Because, you know, the purpose of the program is not to, like, raise money. It's to pay for the program. So the answer is sure.
That's what you're doing in spite of our queries about getting it reduced. I mean, the expenditures, a plan for this overfunding, if you will, ought to be in reimbursement to patients. This is patients' money.
Ben and then Jerry.
And then, speaking of divergence that you mentioned, do you feel that there's currently a divergence looking at where we're currently at in our state of accounts and knowing the feedback you've gotten over the last year from the Advisory Council of Medical Marijuana, which specifically is one of the few things that is charged, is advising specifically on fee structures? Do you, for the past year, have you, you know, what have you heard us saying? And then what are those actions that have been taken? And if I'm not seeing them, you know, why not?
Well, I don't know what you mean. What?
I mean, you're saying there was a divergence of the monies that were collected.
No. I said, what I said was,
If there's divergence.
yeah,
I'm
if you
asking,
raise
is there a
more,
divergence?
well, it's $4 million. It's right here.
Well, it's actually,
It's $4 million.
That was July 2013, it's 5 million.
Well, I don't know if it is or not. Again, July is incomplete. You know, July is incomplete. But what we do know from last biennium, it's about $4 million.
So
That's
back
the
to the
cash
question
balance.
is, do you see that as a divergence?
Yeah, it's more than zero.
So then the question is specifically, since there has been this divergence and it's been ever growing, since we made a recommendation over a year ago, and since we're chartered as the Advisory Council of Medical Marijuana to make those recommendations, I am just asking, and since you agreed there is a divergence, and that we have been making recommendations for a year, and the divergence has been increasing on an exponential level on the backs of sick and dying patients, my question is, why hasn't there been any action taken?
Do you have a specific proposal that you want to make?
Yes, we've had a specific proposal.
Which was what? Lower
a
fees?
year ago,
Lower fees.
Correct.
Okay. To try to bring it more in line.
Correct.
Okay.
And so the question is that since that has been, you know, pretty much almost every time brought that up, the question is, can we expect an answer? And then, you know, if we can, when would that be? And if we agree already that there is a divergence and that, what is your alternate suggestion?
Well, let's leave it at this. How about if we look at what, because we've got our statistics, right? We know how many registrations we issued. We know how much cash balance there is. So we ought to be able to look at that and say, well, you know, could it be, I don't know, could it be $175 instead of $200? You know, or whatever. You know, to make it like, and then we can do a projection, you know, when we get out there to see how that's going to look. I mean, does that make sense?
It does, but unfortunately, that's what we've been requesting in order to do that calculation. We need to know what the expenses are. And so in order to do
well,
that,
we got that now. We got a pretty good 2-year, we got a really good 2-year history now.
Okay.
We got a really good 2-year history.
I think we're going to need to move forward from this, but I think the bottom line here is is that $5.1 million is very excessive balance and indicates a lack of financial responsibility, not at, just as a public agency, but as a responsibility to the seriously ill people who need to come up with these fees. So I think what we're looking for is a commitment from you that our next regular meeting, that Jeff Carlson will be here to present a thoughtful and accurate financial presentation with projections that take into account a potential fee reduction plan, and to answer questions. I think we really need to face this next meeting, and there's a likelihood that we're going to call a special meeting regarding advice to the rulemaking promulgation for House Bill 3460. So we would also, if we decide to do a special meeting, we would be very interested in financial, thoughtful financial presentation for that too. Sure.
The last thing I'll add to that is, again, we'll have section level legislatively approved budget information. It's supposed to be towards the end of this month. So that's kind of the piece that's missing here. Is we don't know what the projection is for the next 5 years.
Okay. So can we have your commitment to that next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll hold you to it. Okay. Brian?
I just wanted to ask you a question. Regardless of anything we've said to you, it looks like you're running at about approximately a third profit of your expenditures. You said earlier the program wasn't designed to make money. I agree. So it's impossible for me to believe that you guys haven't noticed it, and you guys haven't discussed it, and you guys haven't made plans for this enormous profit margin.
No, we haven't.
It's impossible for me to understand that.
It's not ours. It doesn't belong to us.
Who's making the decision on where that money goes?
It's not going anywhere. It's cash balance. It's sitting there.
It has in the past disappeared.
Yes. So who makes the decision of where it goes?
Legislature.
You guys have no authority whatsoever.
No, we can't spend money just because it shows up. Remember, the legislature does 2 things. It authorizes positions, and it authorizes expenditures.
So you haven't discussed amongst yourselves what?
No.
But you can reduce fees.
I think we can do that.
Yes.
I think if they're in rule, if the fees are in rule, we can do that. If the fees are in statute, then we have to go to the legislature. So, that's how it works. I mean, it's very simple. Our latitude is much less than you imagine.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Okay. Is there any pressing questions for the OMMP staff dialogue? I just had one quick question. Joe Carlson, you're the interim unit manager. Can you please describe that position for us?
Certainly. Tuan is the section manager, and currently they don't have a unit manager. I actually work for Dave in the drinking water program. So on a part-time basis, I'm coming down on a daily to actually do what a unit manager does, work with staff. So that,
can you tell us what that is?
What that is just dealing with daily operational aspects. There's a lot of data, if you want to call that goes through the medical marijuana program. What I do up in the drinking water program is I'm the data manager. So what I'm doing is working on staff to make sure that as all the information that comes into the program, we get it processed timely and accurately. So from a standpoint, that's probably as complex as it gets. Now, questions that you have.
So you're working under Tuan at this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. And Tuan, is this one of the permanent manager positions that you're looking to
Possibly,
add?
that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Let me just add a little bit to that. So Joe's helping out, what he's aiming towards is just like about 5 hours a week, just to kind of augment the management program. Because, Tawana's it, only manager in this program. And so I have, proposals sitting with the administration here, which is to actually hire a couple of unit managers and have a management structure commensurate with the size of this program. And so, this is something you guys have talked about for forever. So I did advance that.
Well, we're very happy to have you here, and we know how much Tawana needs extra manager help. So welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Okay.
So he's looking at the processes also so that we can get those applications and cards out timely, making sure we're meeting the statute.
How long is it taking to get cards out right now? We didn't hear that.
Did we talk about that this time? Aaron, maybe
We
this
did
was-
not. I don't have it already.
It's pretty
It's
fast.
around 3 minutes.
I think it's like it's like around 20, 25.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we're going to move on to our dialogue, and we have a few topics to dialogue about. The first of which, Tom Burns, would you mind coming up so we can dialogue with you? We want to talk about the rulemaking process. And for those of you who don't know, Tom Burns is the rules coordinator for facilitator. Okay. And your regular job is director of the pharmacy program. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Absolutely happy to. I'm Tom Burns. I'm the director of pharmacy programs for the Oregon Health Authority. In that capacity, I essentially manage the purchasing and distribution policy of all prescription drugs for any state taxpayer dollars. That includes the Medicaid program, the Oregon Education Benefit Program, the retirement program, the state employees health benefit program, and then I help Bruce whenever he needs help on various things. I mean, this is one of those where he asked me to come and try and help put together the rules around the dispensary program. I guess a couple of thoughts that I might share is it's real clear to us that we are talking about medicine. This is not a discussion about legalization. This is a discussion about medicine for people who need medicine to serve their medical needs. It's no different than the discussions I have with providers when I say, why are you buying, prescribing this kind of medicine as opposed to that kind of medicine? It's a medicine, and that's what we're talking about. So when we talk about dispensaries, we're looking at trying to put rules in place that will do the same type of thing that a pharmacy does for prescription drugs, which means they have a safety network in place, they have secure facilities to protect the medicine so that the patient knows when they get a bottle of fill-in-the-blank drug, that drug has been properly stored, that it has been at the right level, it has not been exposed to sunlight. There is, in the case of the medical marijuana, there's no mold, there's no mildew, there's no pesticide residue. It's medicine, and it's medicine that we need to find a way to assure the consumer that they are getting what they are prescribed and purchased. And then the other side of this is, as the governor said in his letter, is we need to make sure that as we build these dispensaries, that we are building something that does not create law enforcement problems in the communities where they're located. And that's what my charge from the governor's office is. So I am a facilitator. I will be helping coordinate the meetings, helping run the meetings, but I am not going to be saying we're going this path or that path. It's a discussion that will occur amongst the members of the Rules Advisory Committee. An open process, a process that will include plenty of time for dialogue among the committee members as well as dialogue from audience participation. And we will come up with a recommended rule that unless it is truly something that is illegal, and there are lawyers that are in the room who are going to be advising us on whether we've crossed the line and that we're making new law as opposed to defining law. It will be what will go forward and become the rules by which new and legal dispensaries are in place in this state. A couple timeline issues. We are having, the committee's been appointed, and if you haven't seen it, there is, you will find everything around this subject of 3460 on a link from the regular OMMP webpage. So if you start there, at the very top of that, there's a link, and it will take you to another webpage that will have dates of meetings, who the rules members are, draft proposals for the rules, every document that we're going to put out will be posted on that webpage. The first meeting is set for Friday, September 20th, in Salem. It's at the address is 875 Union Street. I think that's the EDD, the Employment Development Department. They have a wonderful auditorium where there's plenty of seating for people to attend. They can, it might, you know, so everybody can hear, handle about 150 people, so there's plenty of room for people to come. It will be a dialogue with the members on, you know, in you having a conversation with each other for people to watch. I anticipate that we will have first draft out sometime the middle or early next week, so that the committee can see it in advance of the meeting. The meeting will be an opportunity to sort of talk process, how they want to run the meetings, how they want to move forward with this process. There will maybe some sort of quick, you know, hey, you know, you messed completely and didn't talk about security at all, or, you know, we need to do something different. And, you know, some broad discussions. I see it as also be short. And then, quite frankly, I'm hoping the committee will go down and do what you did as far as the rules. Start editing that and start sharing it amongst themselves and amongst us. And then we'll bring the committee back together. I would guess sometime in mid-October. There'll be another meeting in mid-November. We have to have rules in place by February 1st. That's a day, that is an artificial date that we'll fit that. But we want rules in place by February 1st because the law says that we have to start accepting applications on March 1st. And it would be unfair to put the rules in place on March 1st and try to get an application. So we're going to give 30 days to the growers, or to the dispensary owners, to see exactly what the rules in which they're going to operate. So in order to meet a February 1st start date, the final rules have to be done by the committee by December 1st. I know, I don't understand why there's a 2-month lead time, but you've got to post them, you've got to give them to the Secretary of State, there's got to be formal here. I don't understand any of that stuff. I will before this is over, but anyway, I'm just laying out. The calendar is September, October, November meeting. We may sneak a 4th meeting in if we have to, but we will basically be final with the rules by first week of December. Formal posting of the rules. There could be some, you know, when the lawyers get hold of it, they may tweak a word here or there. Formal posting of the rules on February 1st. Start accepting applications on March 1st. You had a discussion about fees. The committee will be setting the fees. The fees will be needed to hire the appropriate people to do 2 things: to inspect the facilities, to make sure that they meet the statute and the law and the rule, as well as process the paper that will come in to set the facilities up. The legislature said there were 4 staff involved with that. It's an $800,000 budget. I'm anticipating that's what it will be unless the advisory committee says we just can't live with that, in which case we'll have to move back to the legislature potentially in the February session to tweak that number if necessary. The legislature did not set fees. It will be the committee that sets fees. Other than that, I'm open to any questions or discussions about this. I hope that, I know Todd's on it, and I appreciate the input that I heard. I did see your special meeting. I read your notes. I appreciate the input that was given for the members. We put a committee together that we felt had the appropriate advocates, sponsors, law enforcement, public public members, as well as the legislators who wrote the bill on the committee to help us craft something that will work for the community.
Cheryl and then Brian.
I just have a couple, I'm one of those lawyers that worries about words, and I just had a couple of clarification cautions, and that is, nowhere is dispensary mentioned in the legislation. They're medical marijuana facilities. I see that's on that webpage, the dispensary again. And the other one is that medical marijuana is not prescribed like other drugs. It's just simply a doctor says that it might help a patient.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes. I appreciate both comments. Dispensary went up because that's my fault. I could have sworn the bill said dispensary, and I had in front of me the governor's letter, which uses the word dispensary. So when we put it up, I said use the word dispensary. I'm going to let lawyers argue that point about whether we can change that by rule and say a dispensary means a facility and a facility means a dispensary. I'm not a lawyer, but I appreciate the point.
Thank you. As you know, I applied and you denied. I'm on the ACMM, been here for years. I also noticed that it is heavily law enforcement biased. That is to say, it has a large number of law enforcement people, has no patience. I have several questions about this. Where did this composition come from? Who advised you or ordered you to have lots of law enforcement people and nobody like you?
Brian, I work for the executive branch, and as such, and the governor made it very clear in his signing letter that it is first, not second, first, we want to ensure the overall safety of our communities through appropriate laws to license and regulate dispensaries. And we interpreted that to mean we have to have the police and the sheriffs and the DAs. So that's
why would you think that would be more important? And I know it is important, but why would you think it would be more important than those people who have been using this medicine responsibly for 15 years, who have been representing people who have been abused by the police when they try to use this medicine responsibly, and their safety is an issue? Because I'll tell you right now what's going to come out of this rules committee, and I'm on board right now. I'm going to have someone like me on that committee. What's going to come out of this committee are rules that are going to allow law enforcement in a year to start arresting and confiscating monies and property from these people. That's what's going to come out. They're going to come up with little things like, you want to do it like a pharmacy. Okay, you do it like a pharmacy. So how do you check each and every piece of medicine to make sure? Because it's a plant. It's not a synthetic drug. The differences between a pharmacy and synthetic drugs and a plant are enormous. As someone in the pharmacy board, you probably don't deal with plants a whole lot. You deal with synthetic drugs. So the application is inadequate. And that inadequacy creates a vacuum where law enforcement could put in rules that say, we can go in and say, you didn't check this medicine right, you didn't check this medicine right, therefore you're selling marijuana illegally, therefore we're going to arrest you for a felony, and we're going to steal all your money. This is what's going to come out of that rules committee, judging by the makeup and composition. Now I imagine that this rules committee is going to be run by a majority, am I wrong?
I'm hoping to find consensus.
You think you're going to get a consensus for these rules? Now what happens if you don't get a consensus? What if you get 4 people that say, we want it this way, and 6 people say we want it that way?
It is an advisory committee to the Oregon Health Authority.
So these guys make that decision?
No. The Oregon Health Authority makes the decision. These guys are the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program.
Him?
No.
He's the director of the Oregon Health Authority? No. So you're going to put these rules into the advisory, like us. You're going to advise them what to do, and they're going to make this decision.
All I can tell you is it is my charge, the director of the Oregon Health Authority, to come up with a consensus document that we get as broad agreement as we can. If there's one holdout, I can't solve a holdout, but I will work very hard and hope that everybody who's at that table, and I've talked to everybody at the table, and I made it very clear, I'm not looking for you to come and blow this system up, because that's not productive. The law is the law. We have facilities on March 1st, whether law enforcement likes it or not, whether the consumer likes it or not, whether the neighborhood likes it or not, it's coming.
No, I understand that. My input to you, Mr. Burns, is we need rules that protect those who have these facilities from over-aggressive law enforcement activities.
The law has already done that.
No, I'm telling you, just for example, when we wanted more qualifying conditions, they had the same rules advisory committee. And came up with a rule that denied anyone ever having a new qualifying condition. We had to go to the legislature for our veterans in the state of Oregon in order to get PTSD admitted. Now, I know I'm being a little aggressive with you, and I appreciate the way that you're handling me. Most people don't do it as well as you are. But I have very little time to express these things to you, so I'm trying to implant them in you as you run this meeting. This is what you're going to come up against. You're going to come up against rules that look good, but in reality are nothing, except the opposite. He was on the rules committee for the qualifying conditions.
The legislators who wrote this bill, the advocates who helped the legislature write this bill, are all going to be making sure that what you feel.
Let's hope so. And if you prove me wrong, I'll be eternally grateful.
Well, I hope to come back in your January meeting and have you agree that
Nothing would make me happy. If I got out of the marijuana protective business and into something else, I'd be very happy. And these rules might do that for me.
Okay, we're going to try to keep it brief, but Ben, Alice, and then Jerry.
And it was partially addressed.
Sandy too in there.
But my question was, is you mentioned that it's a medicine versus a medicinal, right? And there is a distinction there, and I know as a veteran of the pharmaceutical industry for 18 years, as an employee for GlaxoSmithKline, that obviously that, when I see the makeup, once again, back to the makeup, that's where the concern frankly lies, is that you're right, I have no questions about your credentials when it comes to your ability to assist when it comes to synthetic drugs. I do have a great question of the medical versus medicinal. That you try to take, frankly, an herbal shot, just regular that's sold, as you know, St. John's is working differently. You switch that over and try to have them comply and comport with pharmaceutical laws, it wouldn't work very well. Could we agree on that? Yeah.
This is not a pharmaceutical law. This is a law with very specific. I mean, the legislature wrote a law, and they have words in there. And the committee's charge is to define the words in a manner that people understand. And I would pick pesticides, for example. I mean, I got on the phone and talked to various people who run the laboratories that are currently testing this product. Well, do you want a panel of 5 pesticides, or a panel of 25 pesticides, or a panel of 100 pesticides? I don't know, and I'm not making that decision. The committee will make that decision with input from, and we've reached out to our Department of Agriculture, who actually does decide what the term pesticide means on the food we eat. My question to them is, that's well and good. I consume a lot of food, but I smoke very little. Does it change if you inhale? I don't know. They're going to go find those answers. And I'm hoping that before we're done, the committee is satisfied that we have addressed that. You're right. Using my pharmaceutical...
I was just directly addressing your language and your words and saying you wanted it set up like a pharmacy. And I'm saying that if it's set up like a pharmacy, you won't have a lot of workability in that department. Just to...
Sandy?
Yeah, I was really concerned when I saw this list of people who had been appointed, when I see that one outlaw dispensary owner has been appointed to it. Now, this is somebody who says they're running a dispensary, and you know as well as I do, dispensaries are not legal until March 1st. You have appointed a person who describes himself as a dispensary owner. My outlaw word is added, and I do not understand that. A lot of people are very concerned. I've had a lot of phone calls from people who are concerned that these people who have been running these type of operations, some have been arrested, some have not, seem to think that they have some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Immunity?
Yeah, like they've got preference. Like they have some kind of preference in this process. Yet there are a lot of us, like myself, who have been involved with this for 15 years before, that have been very, very careful to obey what we thought was the word of the law, which said no sales, and have been involved all this time with a lot of people, helping them give cannabis away, and watching all these other people making a lot of money that they were building up. Now, the fees that we're hearing proposed for a dispensary are very high. I'm understanding from what I just heard that maybe that's not in stone yet, but it's going to take a lot of money. And these people, the outlaws, as I call them, have already got themselves set up with money and actually were involved in helping write this bill. So I'm very confused and concerned for the patients. This is a medical marijuana facility. Dispensary to me means legal. And I think a lot of people interpret it that way myself. But I just have to ask you, why did you appoint an outlaw facility owner to this when there were so many other people who have been involved, who know the issues, but not one of them got appointed?
I felt that there needed to be somebody who knew how to run a business like that, because it is a business, and that's what the law looks like to me.
It is a business.
And we needed somebody to do that. Now, are they operating legally today? I'm not law enforcement, I'm not a lawyer, and I can't answer that. I don't know. But they do have what I thought was the knowledge base to help the committee come up with some understanding of what is behind that door. When you open the door and walk in, what should be there, what it should look like, how it should function when you walk in. I have no idea. I walked into my first medical marijuana facility 2 weeks ago. Never been in one before. I was very, very, very impressed. It was what I hope we can come up with. Now, is it what the committee wants us to come up with? I don't know. They're going to make that decision, not me.
Is it legal? That's the issue.
Alice, and then Jerry.
Just to carry on a little bit further with what Mr. Michaels had to say, I agree. 6 out of 13 of the appointees to the Rules Advisory Committee are either in law enforcement, have been in law enforcement, and I find that concerning to myself. 6 out of 13 is quite a number. And did I understand you correctly to say that 3460 was to address patient needs?
I think that's the way I read the bill.
In order to, okay, may I ask which one of these appointees is a patient that would know best about what patient needs might be?
I have no idea, and I have no way
And
of
why weren't there any patients appointed?
I don't know that there weren't.
I just wanted my questions to matter, well, I don't see where any are. They're not listed.
And I don't know. I do not, I mean, I did not look at the records. I have no idea what these people's relationships are to the current OMMP program.
But you specifically sought out a dispensary owner for their own expertise and background knowledge, but you did not apparently seek specifically a patient?
I threw open the net and looked at all the information that came to me, and some people have said they were patients, and some people said they were patients and advocates, some people said they were caregivers, and some people said they were caregivers and dispensary owners. You know, I took what was in front of me and came up with a list.
I see. Well, thank you for your time.
Okay. Jerry, and then we're going to probably move on.
Yeah, I apologize that I'm not more familiar with the people on the committee, but I'm curious, is anybody on the committee a delegate from the Department of Naturopathy, the Board of Naturopathy, or a member of the college?
Can't hear.
College of Naturopathy. I think that would be a sound recommendation for the future.
We can't hear you, Judy.
I think it would be a sound recommendation for a future member to sit on the naturopathy board or to get connected with a college.
Yeah, I think it's in summary. I feel like this committee finds that there have been some significant stakeholders and experts that are lacking from the current Rules Advisory Committee, and it's hard to suggest making a 13-member committee any bigger. Sometimes it gets dysfunctional that way, but I can really see the frustration this committee feels with having 5 or 6 law enforcement representatives, and there's a lack of patient representation. There's no practicing medical doctors. There's no herbalists or naturopaths, as Dr. Lerberger pointed out, there's one other category I was trying. Lab expertise. I think that's probably the most important technical piece of advice.
Let me comment both on the issue of lab and security, if I might. We did have a discussion about whether we should put somebody who was a laboratory person on the committee as well as somebody who was a security expert on the committee who Bill has security clearance. I argued not to because those are so technical. Again, I have no idea whether it's one pesticide or 100 pesticides. I think that it would be my hope the committee identifies a group of subcommittee members, for lack of a better term, to say, those of you who have an interest in pesticide, mold, and mildew, the Department of Agriculture is going to start meeting over here with, and I've reached out to laboratory members to come up with those rules, but they're going to be really technical and sticky stuff, and I don't know whether the other 13 members of the committee are going to even want to fall too far into those weeds in part of the time. And I think the same thing on security. I mean, I read the Colorado rules, and they're down to the number of pixels that have to be behind the camera, and how long you have to keep the tapes, how the tape that the cameras have to be from the door. I have no idea. I don't know. I think that by turning to a security group and say, here's what the law says, you guys are experts in this, you go come up with something that will work. Hopefully it doesn't cost $1 million, and I hope that, if it does, we're not going to accept it. But you guys go off and do that as a means to allow us to look at the bigger picture. So that's why they're not the same.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I guess it wouldn't hurt to point out that there's a gender balance too. There's 12 men and 1 woman.
Yeah. And there's also an ethnic balance, and that I am frustrated by both of them. I cannot tell you how frustrated I am by both of them.
Okay. But we do realize that you are doing the best you can, swimming in uncharted waters, and I'm sure that this committee would be pleased to see the RAC composition different. But we'll of course do the best we can to try to come to consensus.
I encourage you to be there on the 20th to watch, listen, and partake in the discussion. I'm in Salem at the EDD building. It's 875 Union Street, which is right across the street from the Health Services building.
The which building?
The Employment Development Building.
Oh, okay.
And don't panic, the webpage is wrong. We had it initially inside the HSB, but there's security reasons where we can't. And so we decided not to make people who might be a little uncomfortable to go through our security, so we moved it into a public space. That was a more of an auditorium space.
What time is it?
So it starts at 9 o'clock.
9 a.m.
I hope it will be over by noon, although we have the room until 3. And I would like to
leave you with a party comment. In my view of looking at the statute, your only real obligation is to develop rules to apply for applications and receipt and processing of applications and potentially suspension or revocation. In reality, any other rules that are drafted are at your discretion. You have no other obligations. And I caution you here because the more rules you start writing, the more details within which law enforcement will go up against these folks. And the difference between Oregon and Colorado and every other darn state that's passed any of these kinds of laws is that the Oregon law enforcement community is vehemently, viciously, passionately against anything related to it. And that circumstance exists in no other state. And when you have 6 of these people on your committee, I would caution you to watch out for how much detail and how many extra rulemaking they want to do in order to enforce laws against these facilities. That's my comment to you, and that's my fear for you, and as you go through this path of promulgating these rules. Keep it to the licenses. Application, revocation, processing, suspension, that's it, easy. Let the market do everything else.
I appreciate your comments, and I hope that you will keep reminding me of those as we move forward.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we just have a couple items on our dialogue, so we'll try to keep this as short as possible. Cheryl, do you want to talk about the meeting minutes?
Yeah, when I looked at the last 2 sets of meetings, I was disturbed because they were getting longer and more rambling, and it seemed like the minute taker wanted to capture everything. And so I talked to Tawana about this, and I did some editing and stuff, and, came up with some advice on, what the person should look at. And she told me there's not a consistent person to take minutes, but will be when she gets an assistant. But so she said this had come up in the past and that I should talk with the committee about it. So basically, to be legal, meeting minutes only need time, date, location, names of those in attendance, the presence of a quorum, and official actions taken by meeting participants. And so I understand that people would like some information on there, but it's really a challenge for the minute taker to try to get everything down. And I know that I've taken minutes for many boards and just try to summarize what's being said. We're not here to transcribe and get every word. And what happened, it was jumping from one tense to the other, and it just wasn't making sense. So one thing that I think is really important that I think wasn't being done is that the exact motion should be stated clearly for the minute taker, that we need to stop and make sure that who's taking those minutes understands exactly what the motion is. Because there was a motion that was attributed to me that used criteria in the singular, and I would never say that. And so I know that that wasn't the exact motion there. And another thing that came up, it's helpful when making a motion to state your name, particularly if we have a minute taker who's not familiar with all of us, so they can get that down. And of most important, it's don't avoid trying to write everything that was said. It just isn't necessary. That's not the purpose of this meeting. We have it on TV. You can go back and look at it there if you want to get every single word, but it's more important to capture what the intent of the discussion was and the actual motions that we're doing. So with that, I would ask, Sandy.
I just would say that one thing that would really help is if we have the minute taker repeat the motion before we vote.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
All right. Anything else on that topic?
Do we need a
Response
motion
or-
on that? We could just advise, right?
Yeah.
We're all good.
I agree with her. That's what our discussion was, is that we just need to get the content that's there and make the motion clear. So I think sometimes we don't understand what the motion is, we go back and forth, and it's hard for them to capture. And this was Jennifer's first time taking it, and she's out now on leave, so I have
Got it
her
all
meeting
down.
today. But I am interviewing on the 17th, 18th, and 19th for an assistant, so that person will be always taking the meeting minutes.
Very good. And Sandy, would you like to talk about the OMMP cover letter?
Yeah, real quick, let me ask, has the OMMP cover letter that goes out with the IDs been changed? And I'm assuming they haven't, since we haven't had any discussion, but that was brought to you 2 or 3 meetings ago. The letter that goes out right now is, I think, almost criminally inadequate because it does not tell you, if you submit an application and when you get your ID cards back, if you had your doctor sign your paperwork and nobody has told you what the rules are at all, you have no idea, because the doctor doesn't know a lot of times that you fill out your form and now you've got your card and there's a 1-page letter, has it changed? That goes out with the card. It does not have where to get the law. It doesn't have what the law is in regard to how much you can have. It doesn't have the website on it. So basically, people who get this notice and don't know about the program are completely in the dark. And the problem here is that if you don't know that 1 inch can turn you from a legally protected patient to a Class A felon, that's really serious. And that's why I believe, I mean, if I was one of those people, I got that, and I all of a sudden was facing a felony charge, I'd be pretty upset at the program for not letting me know even how to find out what the law was. So 2 meetings ago, I believe we submitted a rewritten suggestion, what we could do. Nothing had happened at the next meeting, and now this meeting has passed, and still people are getting very inadequate information about what, how they can find out what the law is. And in addition, I'll just add this on right now, the renewal letter that's been going out to people is very, very confusing, and you had said we were gonna work on that together, and that's still going out the same way. And it's very confusing. Our patient come through, and we have to print out application forms for them, which we have to pay for, because the information you sent them is so confusing, they don't know what to do with it and didn't bring it to the clinic, or didn't take it to their doctor. So, could I just get a report on where we stand on getting that very crucial information out for our patients?
First, I agree with both. That's the one thing I looked at that renewal packet, and it is confusing, and a lot of times they don't fill the APS part. So we do have it as a part of the maintenance part of the database that is in there to be worked on. But there's other things that's high priority, so we have to have the IT people, the team that works on our database, make those changes. They started the process with the cover letter. It's a bulk type of letter, so the program can't just go in there and fix it. But it is in there to get work on. It takes some time. We only have one person as a developer to work on our maintenance of our database. So, and I don't want to make it all confusing, because I'm going to start telling you all the details, it'll be much. So, because of the type of letter it is, because it goes out in a group, in a bulk, because we mail multiple, it's managed by Crystal Reports, right? It's managed by Crystal Reports, which the developer have to make any edits or changes to that. So,
when that change took place,
what changed?
When we stopped sending the whole packet of information that had gone out for a long time, and all of a sudden it changed, we didn't even know about it, that was going to change. That was never run by us. It just changed. All of a sudden.
What changed? Are you talking about the renewal packet, or are you talking?
No, I'm talking about the cover letter for the.
We didn't change the cover letter at all from the.
No, yeah, I'm sorry, but absolutely you did. When I got my packets for several years in a row, I got a copy of the law, I got a whole packet of information. All of a sudden, that all went away, and all I got was one piece of paper with inadequate information on it. Now, to me, that is very, very, very important.
I think we're
right at the
talking
top.
about
Well, we're talking about two things here.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about that first.
So the cover letter, you're talking about that changed when the database came in place, because it's in the went into the database system.
Oh, that's how that changed.
Yes.
Okay. So
Right.
anyhow, it just cut everybody off. They just have no idea.
And so we have we have a draft, right? We submitted it to the OIS team.
All your changes will be incorporated. We did at some point years ago talk about not including tools with everyone's cards. It was the number of patients was increasing. The cost of postage was skyrocketing. Just the amount of time it took to stuff things into envelopes. So now
I know.
we
I
did
was
run
one of the
this
person who questioned that we needed to do that. I was one of the people, and we said, well, people need to know. So I don't have any problem at all reducing it to one page, as long as that page tells people where to get the information. It doesn't, and it's been going on too long now. How many, this is 1, 2, 3, this is 9 months?
Well, yeah, we understand that gotta work with our
We did
resources,
not
but
know
it
it would
takes
take this long.
Didn't they just go like this and say, this is a problem?
Well, we're trying to get it changed over to where we'll be able to edit our letters, and that's why it's taking long.
And then the
it's
second-
not just gonna be that letter, but our other letters as well, and so that's what's taking time.
And the second part is a renewal letter, and that's what you were talking about.
Yes, because I finally looked at that, and it makes it confusing. It was supposed to make it easier to process applications, because the information already be there, and we wouldn't have to make any too many changes, and the person get the cards fast. But then there's the other side that people don't use it, and it was making it complicated, and then the APS was like not being used, and so we're looking to fix that.
All right, thank you. So now we get to schedule next meeting.
Before we talk about scheduling next meeting, I want to talk about the travel plane, because I looked at it last time, and I went over the travel plane with you all and gave you the instructions, and I still had there still was some confusion and so forth. So I put in the packet an example how it should be completed. And the part that makes it hard is to make sure we're getting the right expenditures in. You guys probably see that you guys get a different amount than what you submitted. And that's because we give a specific rate for food. And it doesn't matter what you spent on your lunch or your dinner. It matters about what time you left in the day and if you stayed overnight. So I put a sample in here how the appropriate to fill it out. And I'm also going to tell you what the per diem rate is today, because I said I would provide that with you guys at each meeting now so that you have that rate. And also the index in PCA has changed because we're in a different biennium now, so there's a different number, so I put that on the top there. But when you guys put in the time you start, it says complete date, the date goes there of when you started your travel. So if you left yesterday and you left at 6 a.m., you would put the date, yesterday's date on the date, and under travel is the time you began the travel. It doesn't matter when you end on the day of travel. It matters the time you end when you return, because, and then the instructions tell you how much of that per diem you will get it. So that's where a lot of the confusion is, and is that time, and then I have to guess or call you. Make sure you guys initial and mark that little box just down by your signature. So the total meal for today is well, when you're traveling now, is $66. And then your lodging is $113. What that means is you need to say somewhere under that rate. If you go above $113, then it's going to be out of your pocket. The state's going to only reimburse you for that cost. And I've known in the past that Dr. Cohen, he would check with me or have me write him some letter to get the government rate. So you can ask for that government rate, and if you need a note to prove that, I will give you a letter for that. They should honor the government rate for you. Understand these things.
I've never encountered a hotel that knows anything about a government rate.
Yes, they all have one. Yes.
Oh, we do it all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We do it all the time.
Good to know.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
if you're having trouble with that, and if you want to know up front of what the lodging is, call me.
Sure.
And I can tell you.
Right,
I
thank
think
you.
I have them all in my head now from.
Well, thank you for that clarification, Tawana.
Yeah, so I attached the instructions again, and I gave an example how to fill it out.
Okay.
This is good.
All right, so we're going to schedule our December meeting. Does anybody have any restrictions or suggestions?
December 24th.
Yeah.
So I know she said.
That's true. Yeah.
I have one suggestion, just based on that the first week of December is when the final rules will come out for eligible, so doing it.
Soon after that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So with that in mind, and with Alice in mind, it looks like the second week. Does anyone have any conflicts? The second week of December, 9th to 13th. I prefer if it was not a Thursday or Friday, but.
I'm busy that week, other than Thursday and Friday.
Jerry?
I'm tied up on the 12th and 13th.
Okay.
December 9th, I have a meeting at 10.
How about the early part of the 16th, 17th, or 18th? I'm okay there.
I'm available the 16th.
17th?
I'm good the rest of the week.
Everybody's good at 17th?
17th?
You guys?
Okay.
Okay. And
Where
we're
is it? Oh, it's here.
probably here, yeah, here or
How about Eugene's?
I thought the December one was supposed to be here.
Yeah, the December is here.
That's the only one that's,
Is the last one, then
the other one's
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So we're looking for penciling in the 17th. Okay. All right, we're gonna move swiftly. We're a little bit behind schedule. So I'm just gonna breeze through my horticulture report.
10 till 2:30.
Okay, so we're moving on to subcommittee reports. So Horticulture Research and Safety Committee, our current members are myself, the chair, Kristen Gustafson, Wade Holloman, Daniel Bauer, and Rigel Hope. Because the standards for lab testing of medicinal cannabis and pesticides, for pesticides and molds is an important provision of our new Safe Access Bill. Our Horticulture Research and Safety Committee drafted recommendations for lab testing standards, which we distributed at our July 29th special meeting. And that document will likely be revised and presented for consideration to the Rules Advisory Committee that's coming up. My chair report, basically about the Rules Advisory Committee that we discussed earlier. As many people know, the rulemaking promulgation is usually handled by the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, and that has been shifted to the director's office, I guess largely due to Governor Kitzhaber's signing statement. So that way, we met it on the 27th in the context of the OMMP doing the rulemaking. So we're going to have to shift our thinking around a little bit. So regardless of the Rules Advisory Committee composition, you know, the Oregon Health Authority has a mighty task in promulgating this complex and minimally precedented set of rules in a very short amount of time. So as a Rules Advisory Committee member, I'm committed to working with whatever committee composition we're going to be working with in the most productive manner possible to advise this Oregon Health Authority on this rule promulgation towards a safe, responsible, and reasonably regulated medicinal market for medicinal cannabis. And yes?
Do you know if those rules will be sent to the ACMM as they come out, like next week, or how's that going to work? Do you know?
They should be, right?
Send them to us.
Oh, we did send them.
No. He says the rules coming to the ACMR committee meeting.
He said they'd send them to us so we could look at them when they were.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they'll be shipped out far.
The drafts,
So,
yeah. Okay. And will that be going through you or with
Probably Tom.
Probably from Tom.
All right, make sure that happens. Okay, that's it for my report. Any questions? Okay.
I have one. Excuse me, Mr. Delato. I'd like to digress just for a moment back.
I'm sorry, we don't have very much time, and we need to keep the committee business going. But we can talk afterwards if you like. Okay, Sandy, your report.
Oh, my report is, first of all, we're very, very grateful that the Oregon Health Authority, thank you, Dave, agreed to pay to have Dr. Amanda Reiman come here today. Dr. Reiman is an expert and has been dealing with medical marijuana facilities in California for quite some time. And she's seen the worst of it and she's seen the best of it. And we're really, really lucky to have her come here today. As a result of that, our outreach committee did all kinds of things. First, we got everything out to the media. And mainly just get the word out what's happening. We didn't really think that a lot of them would be interested, you know, in being at the meeting, but we were hoping they'd get the word out. It did get done in our paper. Anybody else saw it? But then, more importantly, we looked at this as an incredible opportunity for policymakers all over the state who have to realize that in 6 months there are going to be medical marijuana facilities everywhere in the state, and they better be ready. And rather than being reactive and not having any idea what was going on, we thought it was extremely important to get word out to them that this was going on. So the first thing I did, thanks to Sarah, who sent me to the League of Oregon Cities, but to the person who was a publicist who said, oh no, that's not me, legal counsel. I got on the phone to the legal counsel, they were delighted. I'm trying to get my people to pay attention. Oh, thank you very much, double exclamation point, that kind of thing. Legal counsel sent me to county commissioners, every county commissioner, city council people, and then more people like that. And then we sent out to every representative and senator 2-page poster that told that Amanda Reiman was coming and how important and how beneficial it would be for them to come. And we sent that to every single senator and representative who voted for the facilities. And then I followed that all up Friday with a note that if you can't make it to the meeting, thanks to the Emergency Center and modern technology, you can read this, you can listen to it at your own best time. I got a lot of answers from people, some who couldn't come, some who can come, who will be here at 1 o'clock. And I'm very excited about that. Other people would, you know, get it out to the people who have the facilities and stuff. No, more importantly, it was the policymakers. They need to be here to hear this, and I'm hoping we have a really good turnout. We do know for sure that we have quite a few people coming to hear Dr. Reiman. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Reiman, for taking your time to come.
It's my pleasure. You know, I was here years ago trying to convince Oregon to pay attention to this issue, and they were kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
So it's really great to know that you're finally, you know, getting this together for patients. It's wonderful.
And then, of course, the other part of my report was the cover letter, and the we've already discussed it. So that's pretty much for the outreach committee.
Thank you, Sandy. And I do want to mention, unless it's been remedied, Harry was unable to make it today, so we're not being live streamed. And I know there are a lot of people who are counting on the live stream to see Amanda's presentation. PK, if somebody has a laptop computer, would you be able to hook them up with the live stream? Is that the case?
If they know how to hook up a camera to their laptop, I have one.
Okay, so if anybody can help out technically with getting the live stream going, please contact PK back there with the camera. And
Otherwise, it's archived.
Otherwise, it's archived and they could look at it another time. But I know there are a lot of people that want to see it today and are going to be tuning in. So if anyone can help, that would be great.
I'll bring the camera back from the truck after lunch.
Okay, super. And thank you for being here, PK. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So before we go into our next agenda item, I'm wondering if everyone got a chance to read through the bylaw, the new draft of the bylaws. We got it late in the day on Friday, and I know I've gone through it a little bit and I haven't had enough time to go through it thoroughly. Okay, I think we'd better table that so we can look through it and get a good look through. So we're going to table the bylaw amendment approval. So that'll give us a little bit more time to focus on our next two agenda items before lunch. Yes?
There was one thing that Cheryl brought up, I believe, regarding membership.
Committee membership?
Yeah.
Or rules advisory?
Committee, okay, never mind.
If you think of it, bring it up. All right, so we're going to move on to a few items that Jim's taking care of around creating a legislative subcommittee for the ACMM, electing a legislative subcommittee chair, and appointing legislative subcommittee members. And he's also going to speak about an ACMM-sponsored legislative concept. I'll turn it over to Jim.
Okay, as you know, we have had Representative Buckley come in and ask the group and tell the group to be, you know, kind of the conduit between him and these past bills that have been in. And so we've kind of decided, or I've come up with this concept, and would like to make the motion that we have a subcommittee for a legislative liaison between, well, probably him, since he's the main person right now. And at the same time, since we have a lot of difficulty in getting things done through the rules process. And because the ACMM and the OMMP program is probably more on top all around of the initial helps and needs of the program when it comes to certain things, that if we were to write a bill and present it, either from the ACMM or the OMMP through it as something to get a legislative concept and a measure number, that we might have a lot easier time doing it, particularly for cleanup items that we know there's been a much needed cause for. So I'm saying I think we should, I'm making the motion that we should put together a liaison subcommittee for the legislature, possibly come up with a piece of legislation to be put forward by P. Buckley. I'm sure he'd do that for us.
I second.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Jim made a motion to create a legislative subcommittee of the ACMM, and it was seconded twice. Any discussion on that? People feel it's a good idea? Okay, very good.
I would also like to extend that idea into the point that there's a lot of things out there, and I don't know why they haven't been changed. It always seems that it's butting head with if we can do it and if we can't. I think we've got full clarification now that the legislature actually wants this from us. And I think we know there's an issue that we need to be dealing with, that we should put these suggestions together, both as the ACMM and the program, and get them into legislation, particularly clean up things, the 12-12 rule, for instance. We've been told, I don't know how many times we should just be able to change that by rule, and Brian tried to help me do that when I was the chair, and we couldn't get it done. So if we can't get it done that way, then maybe this is the route we have to travel. And maybe by coming from the program, the state program, it might, be heated better within the walls of the legislature. That's what I know.
Sandy.
Representative Buckley and Dr. Goldberg were both here the same day. And I believe we heard from Dr. Goldberg as well, that they were expecting that we would give input to the legislature. So that, to me, makes it was two here that day. So I think it's a really good thing that we do this.
Yes, yeah, I agree with Sandy. Our statutory charge is to advise the director, the Oregon Health Authority, and we serve at the pleasure of Dr. Goldberg, and he acknowledged in our March meeting that he wishes us to be involved with advising the legislature as well, because everything legislative affects the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, the administrative aspects of the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. And of course, yeah, we had that invitation from Representative Buckley, so I feel that this is a very appropriate subcommittee for the mission of the ACMM. So can I ask you to repeat Maureen, to repeat our motion, please?
Sure. Motion is to create a legislative subcommittee of the ACMM, and I know it was sent by Sandy, and I think it was someone else.
And Ellis, I too. Oh, good.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Laird, was that an aye? Laird? Hello. Aye. Okay, very good. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. And still with you, Jim, on electing a chair and appointing members.
Well, I guess that would be by volunteer.
Can I nominate somebody?
Does anybody have any nominations? Sandy?
Jim. I think Jim Clark would be perfect.
Okay, Sandy nominates Jim to chair the Legislative Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
Second by 3 people. Okay, any comments, discussion? Okay, will you repeat the motion, please?
Sure. Sandy nominated Jim Clark as the subcommittee chair, seconded by Ben.
Widely seconded, thank you.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Larry. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So who wants to be on this committee? Alice? Anyone else on the ACMM? Okay.
I'd like to be a member.
Okay, Ben and Sarah. Okay, so Alice, Ben, Sarah, and of course Jim's chair. Those are the ACMM members. Anybody interested out there?
Yeah, Chris.
Okay, Kristen. Okay, Anthony. Do we want to? How about we vote on the ACMM composition first, and then we'll vote on individual members. So. Okay, so Maureen, would you please repeat the motion for the ACMM members to be on that committee?
Yeah, so on the legislative committee for the ACMM, we have Alice Ivany, Ben McInnes, Sarah Bennett, and of course Jim Clare is the chair.
Okay. Second, anybody?
Second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of that composition, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay.
So I make a motion that we leave it to the committee to appoint any non-ACMM members to the committee.
And we'll come back and vote next
Do
meeting.
we have to vote on all subcommittee members?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And so that they bring those to us at the next committee.
Yeah, I would suggest that I saw a number of hands that went up that would like to be on that. If you can give me your email addresses in the beginning, I'll send something out to you, and you can give me a little idea about your background, whatever. We can go from there. I'd like to see as much cooperation with people who want to do this as possible.
Very good, so that's how we'll proceed. What, yours? No, we need a motion.
So I withdraw my motion.
Yeah, okay, sure. All right, do you want to talk about legislative concepts, any specifics?
Hopefully, the main thing is to be able to get something through the legislature at the highest point of integrity, and coming from those people that are out here, and particularly the people that are on the committee, I think it helps us in the ability for not to get arguments, because the amount of knowledge here over 8 years of this committee itself, and many of us that's been involved since the OMMP has even been in existence, that we know, and I really want the program management, to say, hey, we could kind of like to have this out of it, and if it's has something to do with, you name it, or you have them, is there a way to get you more of your funds? Can we put that in something so that you can use it? I know when they make a freeze for hiring and stuff, they do it across the board, but and so there's not much we can do that unless we can change the law. So at least see where we can do some of those things. And the rest has to do with issues, like I've said, that we've had and have just kind of been involved on since the beginning. Nothing I'd like to get rid of more than a 12 by 12 rule. And I think there's a few of those issues that just really need all the help they can get so we can do that. So if anybody else out there has it, I can tell you this, I would like to see anybody with a chronic condition who is either in hospice or, really has a condition where they're never going to not have it, have a simpler way of being in this program, and maybe not necessarily having to re-register every year.
I think the issue of having to list or go site when there isn't one would be one I would really like to see that.
And actually, I had a question about that. From my dealings down in Curry County Health System has already begun signing guess, doctor's forms for PTSD. And I guess it was too early. I don't know, they may have just signed it as PTSD, but they already had another condition that did it, so it wouldn't matter. But when we were talking about getting information out to those type of people, maybe that's something that we should be doing, is getting a hold of our county health system and letting them know when they can do that, when it's proper for them to do that, and because it's very confusing. I can't find it on the website. So that you need these people weren't signing for nobody. And then when PTSD became a qualifying condition, they started signing for people. And kind of shocked. It shocked me, particularly because it was in Curry County. But it was really a great thing to hear that they, times are changing. That's happening.
Any more stuff?
Not really. I think we just got to take it to the next stage and start working on it.
Very good. Okay. If I may, between Jim reminded me of something I wanted to ask for before. With our statistics reporting, could we also return to having the conditions listed and how many applications indicated those conditions? Because I think that's going to be very interesting when we start having PTSD on those.
Just to respond, I think you may have not been asked for a response, but there's two issues with PTSD. So it goes into effect January 1st, so we can't issue cards to a patient with that condition as the only condition marked on an APS until that date. We can accept attending physician statements dated prior to January 1st, but then the second issue is you have to worry about current medical documentation, and that's defined as within 90 days of when we receive it. So it's going to have to be signed after October 1st. So that's because that's what the but yeah, beginning January 1st, we'll start issuing those cards.
Okay. And we could have those statistics reported?
Of course, I'm sorry. That was a given, absolutely no problem with that. I just wanted to kind of get to what Jim said, and I know Sandy and I have talked about that. We'd appreciate it if you waited closer to January to submit those, anyone that has that, but that's the only qualifying.
The issue is if they sign on October 1st, you're not open January 1st. So what we're doing is...
They can turn it in.
Yeah.
I don't mean to suggest you can't turn it in until January 1st. So we just don't want to turn it in October 2nd. We'll be sitting on those.
Okay, so now you're saying as soon as it's been
submitted
signed...
Right, it just won't be issued.
Okay, when you talked about this before, it was unclear. As soon as it's been signed after October 1st, they can go ahead and send it in. You're going to sit on it until January 2nd?
We prefer that not happen. We prefer you wait until maybe December, but we're not going to shred.
Well, what we're worried about is our patients might get signed early and then hold it too long, and then that creates a problem. So we're trying to be really clear in writing what they're supposed to do. So we're scheduling after October 1st, not on the 1st. And then we're telling them they need to turn in, we're saying the 2nd, because at that point then the mail would actually be running. So, but by the 1st. Okay.
So I guess the concern is a PTSD only application being denied. So
we just don't want to create a whole process of applications.
You're going to have to file.
Because they would sit and
right.
they don't want to have.
So as long as they're not denied, then that's probably the only concern.
If you waited 6 months to turn them in, they would ultimately.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that
It
clarification.
just won't be processed when they turn it in before January.
Okay, so now we have until our lunch break at noon to discuss House Bill 3460, Oregon Administrative Rule promulgation. And we're also going to decide if it will be necessary for the ACMM to have another special meeting to discuss this further. So, anybody want to start the discussion off? Sure.
I'm wondering if we can't, through email, as a committee, discuss the rules that are coming out next week in preparation for September 20th, and maybe come up with our opinion as the ACMM, what we think is right or wrong with the rules and where we stand. It will require a lot of email discussions, and a little difficult to come up with a vote per se, but I would like to try to do that.
By
That'd be my
email?
most, yeah.
I agree, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Well, I would make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And no offense to Todd, because no, he's on the committee, has his own opinions, and they may differ from the ACMM's opinion. That's certainly reasonable.
Yeah, I'm just grappling with the bylaws, just to make sure that whatever we can come up with is consistent with our bylaws. So, does anybody have any opinion on
Whether
whether
be
work
inconsistent.
Well,
We're advising the Oregon Health Authority, and that's who's ultimately going to be deciding on the rules.
okay.
There's nothing that prohibits email meetings.
Yeah, it's just coming up with a decision on something that represents the ACMM. Okay, well, we can have a discussion on that while I'm looking this up.
So I think, because I just got done reading it this morning, I think, and I'll look at it again, it's going to be incorrect, but then we could have all the discussion and actually formulate something and then have it, but it looks like it does need to be, it does actually identify whether it needs to be first or not, but it says there needs to be a formal meeting and a date, so if it's a special meeting, to make any decisions, so that we need to be some sort of meeting. That's what I was reading, but we can have all the headwork done.
Yeah.
So at the special meeting, instead of having all the discussion, we're actually voting on something that we've already had communications on, and already in some level already in agreement on. But
as I read the relevant section of our bylaws, if we vote to approve an action, we need to vote to approve an action at a public meeting such as this. So if we approve an action at this meeting and describe that action as it was in the motion that authorizes our email communications to develop an opinion, an advisory letter opinion, then I think that would be consistent with our bylaws. So, Maureen, would you mind restating our motion there?
So what I have, the motion is to begin, the ACMM will begin an email communication on the draft 3460 rules to provide ACMM advisory letter opinion.
And I would add to that that will be developed in the interim. That the opinion letter will be finalized in the interim, and then that this committee authorizes that action. Am I saying that right?
The interim what?
Interim decision making.
Interim between meetings.
Say the last part again.
And the ACMM authorizes this action. Okay. All right, and we had a second on that? Is that okay?
Yeah, I had second.
Okay, and second the friendly amendment? Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So with that, we still have 10 minutes to have lively discussion. We got lunch early.
Okay.
Well, like I said to Mr. Burns, I think that our safest bet is to limit the amount of rules that are promulgated. Let the market deal with the requirements of the statute. The statute requires the agency to promulgate rules to form applications, receive applications, process applications, suspend and revoke applications, conduct inspections and apply fees. Other than that, everything else to me seems a camel's nose in the tent for law enforcement to find a way to bust these places. We should look to avoid that.
Let's not back up right away. I have a couple of things to talk about. I wanted to ask Tawana and David, now that the rules promulgation has moved to the director's office, you know, I see you guys as having a great deal of expertise and experience with regulating the medical marijuana system, and you know, because I see you as very valuable to the rulemaking process, and I'm just hoping that you're not being cut out of it. What's your involvement? As we
We're
move on?
subject matter experts.
Subject matter?
We are subject matter experts. So if Tom needs us, we're there for him. How's that?
What has he asked you for so far?
Ask us to get a state temp on board to help him with the rule writing, so we're taking care of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
a temp.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And that gets paid from the $4 million?
Actually, no, because that'll have to be paid out of the fees that come in for this program.
That's added to 800.
There's not any money
Yes.
coming out
Yeah.
of the
So it's like a
program
loan.
to support
Yeah.
that program.
Yeah, yeah.
This is out of the 800,000.
And do you?
Yes.
I forget exactly what the statute says, but is it possible? I know I talked with Tom a little bit about some of the possibilities about having it possibly run through the Secretary of State's office. Is there a possibility of multi-agency?
I think if you read the bill, it's assigned to OHA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, where will it be? To be determined. Yeah.
Do you have any crystal ball on that?
Well, I have one. It won't be in this program.
Yep, that's one.
Yeah, I mean, that was almost crystal clear to me. It won't be in the medical marijuana program.
Do you know why?
Completely different function, just like Tom mentioned. You know, these guys need to be working the registry, doing a good job with that, and you don't mix these things up. You know, they're completely different functions.
It's like the OLCC of the liquor makers.
There you go.
That's
Yeah.
good.
And
There you go.
so, you know, Bruce Goldberg was crystal clear about that, so.
That makes sense.
I agree with that.
The only way, each one is gonna do their job better if they only do their job, not both jobs.
So if that's the case, then I'm looking at the ACMM's role in advising the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program.
Your job is to advise OHA.
OHA, okay, on the.
I think you're good.
Okay. Very good. I just want to see that it's properly advised, whether you listen to us or not.
Yeah, that's OHA.
Okay.
I'll say it out loud, you have to remember the medical marijuana facility law is an adjustment to the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. It's not a whole new section of law. So we exist under that act to advise about that act.
Okay, okay, Alice?
Will there be a separate committee to advise the facilities created? Do you
Didn't that
know?
all? We don't know that. It didn't address anything
Yeah,
like
it
that.
doesn't
It didn't
say
used to
anything about
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys didn't exist, but then it got added.
Right.
Later, so.
So we have that experience ahead of time, you know, with regards to the ACMM functioning.
Well, again, this committee's job is to advise OHA.
So it would include the facilities, because the medical marijuana facilities law is an adjustment to the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. And we advise OHA on the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. Why we're not promulgating those rules ourselves, I don't know.
That's,
I have a question for clarification. Was your motion instead of holding another special meeting?
Well, it's meeting September 20th.
Yeah, we got it.
Well, the RAC is, I mean, your email motion.
Yeah, because we have to get something in by September 20th. And the likelihood of us all getting together in the same place at the same time between now and then seems rather slim.
This didn't agree.
Right. So.
Do you need to meet?
So do we need, so we should talk about, do we need to meet physically between now and December is the question? Or is there a motion to say, instead of holding a special meeting?
My motion, and it doesn't mean somebody can't make a different one, was just so that we can have some input at the September 20th meeting and the next and subsequent meetings. Whether or not we can meet between now and the October meeting or the November meeting seems more likely than us being able to meet between now and September 20th.
Okay, because if we're going to have a special meeting between now and December, we're going to need to authorize it at this meeting.
And I thought he mentioned you guys communicating through email instead of having social meetings.
That was for the 20th, pre-September 20th, first wrap.
Okay.
That was specifically to address where we wanted, you know, where we wanted to maybe advise. It didn't have anything to do with the special meeting in October.
David?
Just kind of a procedural question. So, you know, if your intent is to provide input to the RAP, you don't need to meet to do that. You can do that via email and do a
That's
vote.
exactly what
Do
we're
a vote, yeah, do a vote, and you don't need to have special meetings.
And so we can't decide on a special meeting after that, because
Yes.
right now we don't know if we're gonna need it.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, we can authorize a special meeting by email, so.
Yeah.
We could authorize it and then determine whether or not we actually need it.
Requested.
No, we haven't approved the bylaws yet.
Oh.
Okay, so does anybody feel the need to call for a special meeting at this time? Okay. Not scheduled for this time, but decided. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. And does anybody have any further business before we break for lunch? All right, well, we'll break for lunch, and we'll see everybody at 1 p.m. for Amanda Reiman's presentation. Going with our afternoon agenda, we have our special guest here who came all the way from the Bay Area of California. Amanda Reiman is the California Policy Manager for Drug Policy Alliance. And she has a very extensive history of not only studying dispensaries, but patients within dispensaries, communities surrounding dispensaries, and a whole lot of harm reduction research and such. And I'll let her introduce herself further, but we're very happy to have Amanda up here. I invited her anticipating that we'll be in the middle of the rulemaking promulgation for a dispensary law, and her experience in studying dispensaries and everything around them can be very useful in our rulemaking procedure. So, so let's welcome Amanda.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I really appreciate this opportunity. You know, I was actually up here in Portland about 5 years ago, meeting with the then head of the program, Grant Higginson. You guys may remember him. And I think Tawana was working as well. And thinking about, you know, talking to them about, hey, you guys need to know who your patients are and what they want. Because there's going to come a time when you're going to be devising a system of how to care for them. And if you don't understand who they are or what their needs are, it's going to be really difficult to come up with something that they like. And something we've seen in countries like Canada, where they developed a dispensary system, the federal government did, and the patients don't use it. They don't like it. You know, they find it doesn't meet their needs. And so the government spent a lot of money designing this program that nobody's using. And I didn't want the same thing to happen in Oregon. You know, in California, we have a medical marijuana law that we've had since 1996. We do not have any state-level regulation. We're working on that right now as I speak in Sacramento, but we have no state-level regulation. So in California, it's basically been a beta test in every single county and in every single city about what regulation might look like. So that's what I've been studying. When I was at the UC Berkeley getting my PhD, I decided to study medical cannabis dispensaries for my doctoral dissertation. And it was really the first study, this was back in 2005, that sampled patients at the dispensary, that actually went to dispensaries, asked patients, what do you like about this place? What don't you like about this place? That surveyed the dispensary owners and asked, what are you doing to help your patients? And really trying to capture the community-based health service aspect of dispensaries. So what I'm really covering today is looking at dispensaries as an emerging community-based agency. And I think it's really important to view them that way. I mean, okay, yeah, there's marijuana there. We know that. We all know that. It's about, there's going to be marijuana there. It's very exciting and controversial. But marijuana aside, this is really an opportunity to develop a community-based agency that's going to provide health services for your public, for the folks that live in your communities. And so it's a really great opportunity. So we're going to talk a little bit about how dispensaries might operate as a health-based agency, how they can be driven by the needs of the community. I will say I do use the word dispensary, and it's kind of an interesting aside to that, is that they've always kind of been called dispensaries in California, but when I did this research originally back in the mid-2000s, the dispensary operators were not cool with me calling them dispensaries, because they said that's insinuating that we are actually selling something or distributing something out of this place, and it was very much underground at that point. So the book that I wrote for my dissertation actually calls them facilities, calls them medical cannabis facilities. But today I'll probably use the terms interchangeably. So, as I mentioned, the question when you're thinking about dispensary or facility development really is, cannabis aside, forget about the cannabis for a second, what do we need to know to create a community-based agency that provides low-cost or free health or mental health services for ill members of this community? And really, at its basis, that is what a dispensary is. Okay, a dispensary is a place where ill people go to obtain services, hopefully for low cost or free of charge, because they are in need. And the goal is that the place that they go is reflective of their community, of the values of their communities, of the way that their community feels about each other and their role in the greater state, and that this is how people should feel when they go to a dispensary. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who medical cannabis patients are, because again, of course, from social science, we always say, well, who's our population? We're designing this for them. Who's them? Who are they? What do they need? We'll talk a little bit about what dispensaries might offer patients, because one of the great things about a lot of the first dispensaries in California was that, yeah, they offered cannabis, but they also offered a myriad of other health and social services. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of those models look like, and then we'll talk about what probably the folks on the rules committee, especially the law enforcement folks, are probably most concerned with, which is how are dispensaries going to impact the community? Do we have to worry about crime? Do we have to worry about public safety? Do we have to worry about health and diversion? What is the impact going to be? So we'll talk a little bit about some research that's been done, looking at this, looking at what is the actual impact of dispensaries on communities, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So the data that I'm using today was a survey I did. So before I worked for Drug Policy Alliance, I was the Director of Research and Patient Services at Berkeley Patients Group, which is a very large dispensary in Berkeley, California. We had been open for 11 years. We had about 14,000 regular patients. And then we were shut down by the federal government in May of 2012 for being 980 feet from a school. We found another building down the street, and they reopened. And while I went to work for Drug Policy Alliance, they reopened last May, within more than 1,000 feet from any K-12 school, which the federal law says. Feds came in again. Now they're too close to a preschool, which isn't even in the law. So it's been very, very difficult. But when they were in their old space, which I don't know, is anyone here, but Sandy, did you ever go to Berkeley Patients Group? You guys, a couple have been there. So their old space was really amazing. I mean, not only did they have the dispensary, they had a holistic health center where they offered free chiropractic work and acupuncture and massage. They had peer counseling, they had entertainment, and they also had a huge lounge where patients could actually medicate. And it was one of the last places in the Bay Area that had a lounge where people actually could use on site, which really contributed to the community feel. I don't know how that's going to end up coming down here in Oregon, if that's something that they're going to be like, no on-site medication. But it is something that I would consider fighting for, at least vaporization only on site if people are concerned about smoking. Because for a lot of folks in the Bay Area, we found they didn't really have a lot of other places to go. And so if they weren't getting their medicine and then having a safe environment to consume it, they were in a park, or they were in their car, or they were in their shared housing, concerned that someone was going to find out that they were a medical cannabis patient. So that ability to have a safe space to utilize medicine is extremely important. Although concerns about driving and medicating have kind of put the kibosh on that in a lot of places, I would encourage you to think about that and think about ways that you might be able to reduce the likelihood of driving while intoxicated, but still allowing people to medicate on site. So I did this study there. I did 350 surveys of patients. So, you know, we'd ask patients to fill out surveys while they were waiting in line, while they were hanging out. Patients that couldn't read or write, I would do the survey for them. So we really tried to get a wide variety of patient responses. And then in addition, we did 6 in-depth interviews and a focus group with patients. So again, this is really to find out, what do they want? What are they experiencing? What's going on? I mean, we do this kind of research in pretty much every other type of health service, but we don't do it as much when it comes to medical cannabis. So who are the patients? Now, of course, this is a sample from Berkeley, California, although I think it's probably not too far off from what you might find in a more major metropolitan area in a state like Oregon. About 68% male, 66% white, 14% multiracial. The average age is 40, which is what we've seen actually in a lot of research studies we've done on medical cannabis patients. The average age seems to be hovering right around 40, with the youngest patient being 18 and the oldest patient being 81. I will say minors can access medical cannabis in California with parents' permission, and we served maybe 1 or 2 minors that were under the age of 18. We look at any other interesting things about them. 3/4 of them have health insurance. But we know that health insurance does not cover medical cannabis. So these are individuals that actually have access to probably cheaper pharmaceutical drugs because they have health insurance, but they're choosing to use cannabis, which is not covered. And I think that really says something about people's desire to seek out something like marijuana as opposed to a pharmaceutical that they may be able to get for a cheaper cost. 64% are working, at least part-time. 87% have at least a high school diploma, and 81% at least some college. So again, I think this kind of flies in the face of the idea of a medical cannabis patient being someone that's uneducated or unemployed or otherwise just looking for an excuse. And these are really very high-functioning individuals in most cases. I will say that in California, you know, very different. You can get medical cannabis for any condition for which marijuana provides relief. And you know, I hear doctors in California say, basically you have to be able to fog up a mirror to get a medical cannabis card in the state of California. And I'm not going to say that's untrue, but I'm also not going to say that's a bad thing. And that's probably all I'm going to say about that. So the average years coming to Berkeley patients group is 2.5. So these are individuals that have found this dispensary, they're regular users of this dispensary, and 91% visited BPG at least once or twice a month or more. So again, regular members. So I think this really speaks to that community aspect I talked about, right? So for some folks at BPG, we were the only people that they saw in a week that was really aware of their health situation. And a lot of these folks maybe weren't going to doctors as regularly, they couldn't afford it, or they just necessarily didn't believe in that type of treatment. And so a lot of them didn't really have connections with other people where they would be able to talk to them about their health condition on a regular basis. And so dispensaries really provided that for them. And that was also something that came out in the in-depth interviews, was people talking about the sense of community that they got from the dispensary and the sense of isolation that chronic and severe illness creates. So to be able to break through that isolation and talk to people that understood what they were doing and why they were there was a huge relief to people. Because there were some folks, patients that came in, and we were the only people that knew they were medical marijuana patients. Their family didn't know, their employers didn't know, and so this was the one place where they could actually be open about their health and how medical marijuana was helping them, and that was a real huge relief for those folks. As you can see, 34% make less than $20,000 a year. But caveat, this was near campus, so it's possible that we have some UC Berkeley students in here that aren't making any money because they're students. When we look at patient health, 70% of our patients say they have a chronic medical condition. So this isn't something that's going to go away. This isn't like, you know, I had knee surgery and I need some cannabis to help me get through the pain afterwards. This is, I have a condition that's going to need treatment for the rest of my life. And I think that that's really important because, again, you have people that are going to be coming to the dispensaries for years and years and years, and you have individuals that are dealing with an illness that they will have forever. And so that also puts a lot of strain on people and the support that they're looking for. 63% take treatments besides medical cannabis. So I think that's another misconception, is that patients are like, well, screw the medical system, I'm just going to smoke cannabis for everything that's wrong with me. And that's not true either. You know, individuals are using cannabis to complement and to supplement other types of treatments. But you will see that 85% of those who do use additional treatments say, look, I use other stuff, but cannabis is the best. Cannabis has the most, has the least amount of side effects. Cannabis is the most effective for me. It's what makes me feel better compared to my other treatments. And a lot of folks are using cannabis to help them with the other treatments. So things like chemotherapy, things like HIV conditions, so they're using the cannabis actually to help them get through these other treatments and to help with compliance. You know, kind of an aside, something that's really interesting about cannabis is that it helps people be compliant with their medical treatments. And one example of this is people with hepatitis C that have to go to dialysis. So I had a friend as a dialysis social worker, and she would talk to the folks that came in for dialysis, and quite a few of them were medical marijuana patients. And she would ask them, so, you know, is it medical marijuana like help with kidney problems? Or, you know, and they would say, you know what, I don't really know, but I gotta sit here for like 6 hours, like 4 times a week. And if it wasn't for cannabis, I wouldn't come. I just wouldn't come. It makes me be okay with having to sit through this treatment. So medical compliance is also another issue for people that are using medical cannabis. 52% of the patients say they have a pain-related condition, which is what we do see being the most commonly used reason for medical cannabis. 13% arthritis specifically, which I think is really interesting. Again, we're talking about a chronic illness here. And then 75% say that they're using cannabis for a mental health related condition. And they could choose both. They could list all the conditions that they were using cannabis for. But I think something that's really important about this is the number of conditions that have both mental health and physical health symptoms associated with them. And so individuals saying, you know, I was on 2 medications for my physical pain, and I was on 3 medications for my mental health issue, and now I'm able to replace those and I'm on 1 medication for both, which is really fabulous, especially if you have chronic illness and you're worried about what those 5 meds are going to do to your liver after taking them for 30 or 40 years. Something else interesting about this is that even if you have a condition that's primarily a physical condition, like let's say you have chronic pain, don't tell me there's not a mental health aspect to that, right? Don't tell me there's not a mental health aspect for feeling that you can no longer do the things you used to do or participate in the activities you used to be able to participate in. There's absolutely a mental health aspect to that. So individuals are able to use cannabis to treat both the physical and mental health issues that they're experiencing. And then other conditions we saw, you know, appetite stimulation, accident-related injuries, asthma, carpal tunnel, MS, PMS, IBS, all the S's. And nausea. So again, in California, wide open for the conditions that you can use cannabis for. Now, use is something that I get asked about a lot. You know, any of us that have been using marijuana for a very long time, I think that this information doesn't surprise any of us, but for people that aren't that used to it, I think they're kind of surprised that 70% say that their cannabis use has not changed in the past 6 months. And I think there is an assumption that people need to use more and more in order to get the same effect, and we don't see that in the patient population. We do not see people saying, I used to be able to get by with half a joint and now I have to smoke 3. We just don't hear that. I mean, what we hear people say is, I didn't smoke for a weekend and now I feel like I'm back in my first day using cannabis because it seems so much stronger. So the way cannabis works in the system, you just have to stay away from it for 24 hours and you can really get back to the same level of intoxication that you were, like, you know, right at the beginning of smoking. It doesn't take that long for it to wear off. So that's something interesting. We see about 60% are using 3 to 8 grams per week. So about a half, an eighth to a quarter a week, which is, I think, pretty common. And about 46% use cannabis 2 to 3 times a day. So again, we've got individuals that are using multiple times a day, multiple times a week, keeping their conditions under control, but never seeing an increase in the amount they need to use unless their symptoms worsen, and then they may see a need to increase. So that's a little bit about who patients are. And now I want to move a little bit into what dispensaries might be able to offer patients. So now that we kind of know that patients, hey, they're just like everyone. You know, they're every age, they're every ethnicity, they're every educational background, they have every kind of condition. You know, they have chronic conditions and acute conditions, and they are taking all kinds of other treatments in addition to cannabis. It just kind of sounds like an average person, right? It doesn't sound that different. So what would that kind of person like from their dispensary? All right, well, let's talk about the boring stuff first. This is the stuff that your rules committee is going to be going over and over and over again and arguing. Now, the thing that people always talk about first is security. It's got to have great security. You know, we've got to have an armed guard at every door, and we've got to have all these lights and sensor lights and a camera and all of these things. Well, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, but guess what? Dispensaries are not robbed at the same rates as banks. They're not robbed at the same rates as jewelry stores. I mentioned Harborside Health Center, as many of you might not be familiar with. It's probably the biggest dispensary in the country in Oakland, California. They have been open for going on 10 years now. They've had one police call in those 10 years, and it was someone trying to get in without a recommendation. So we really don't see crime being an issue. Now, I tell you what is an issue. What is an issue is when we're not allowed to bank. And what is an issue is when we're not allowed to use armored cars. So really, if the Rules Committee wants to maintain safety, they need to make sure that dispensaries have a way to keep stuff safe. Like, they have to be able to bank, so they're not a cash-only business. They have to be able to transport product and money safely and securely. They just have to, or else that does breach security. So, you know, they have to be able to do it without their hands tied. So that's going to be an important part of this conversation. Protocol for logging what comes in and out. So that's going to be an important part of the dispensary system. You know, when they're going to want to know exactly where each of those bags of marijuana came from, and they want to know where they went when they left the dispensary. So this is going to take an inventory tracking system. It's not that different from other businesses. Other businesses have product that come in, you mark where that product came from, you mark where that product went, who was responsible for moving that product. It's really not that different. There is software available now to help dispensaries with all of this tracking and logging and keeping track of everything and where it goes. So that shouldn't be that much of a problem. You're going to need accountants. You know, you have employees and payroll and insurance. It's so boring, right? I mean, taxes and insurance and taking all care of that, that's going to take accounting. Now, the testing, packaging, and labeling requirements, you know, those have kind of yet to be decided. In California, what we're working on right now basically says that dispensaries have to label their cannabis to show the cannabinoid content, so THC percent, CBD percent. That's really as far as down as we've gone because there really aren't that many strains high in other things, but we may someday see THCV content, you know, other types of cannabinoids as well. So they're required to show that potency, and then they're also required to show that it's been tested for microcontaminants, microbiological agents, so basically potency and purity. And it doesn't say, and marijuana with this much of this thing cannot be sold. It basically says, look, you have to test it, you have to be transparent to the public, and then we're going to come up with these guidelines as to how much can be in it. Did you have a question?
Amanda, I apologize for interrupting. Laird says the teleconferencing is not on. Could they please turn it back on?
Okay. No problem. So that's something that's good. Oh, okay, hold on. All right, well, we'll just wait for that to warm back up again. Okay, well, I'll just keep talking while it warms back up. So the testing, packaging, and labeling, it's coming. It's going to be a part of transparency and patients knowing what they're getting. But so far, you don't know what that's going to look like. So it's hard to plan for that except to say it's going to happen. So start thinking about what that's going to look like. San Francisco, for example, has one of the most progressive packaging law rules in the country, where basically your packaging has to be opaque. It has to have, if it's an edible, you can't see the edible from the packaging, but it has to have a picture of what it is on it to help diversion from kid to kids, I guess. So it's not like, oh, it's a cookie. So there are rules about the edibles. They have to have nutrition content. They have to have how much cannabis is in them, either by dry weight or by THC. And they have to have a dosage. So this is how many doses.
Please enter your access code.
I know a lot of times, They base the dosage on the Sativex dosage, which is 0.15 milligrams per dose.
There are 2 participants on the call.
All right. So a space.
For a menu of available commands.
Okay. So zoning. A space, you have to have a space. And honestly, this has been one of the biggest trials and tribulations in California because of this 1,000 feet from a school issue. So federal law says if you are dealing drugs within 1,000 feet of a school, it's a heightened penalty. Now in California, different cities have passed different laws in terms of zoning for dispensaries. So Berkeley says 600 feet. So the City of Berkeley says you just have to be 600 feet from another dispensary and from a school. The federal law says 1,000. And what the feds are doing, at least in my state, is they're sending letters to the landlords of the buildings where dispensaries are operating saying, hey landlord, you know you're housing a drug dealing operation, and if you don't kick them out, we're gonna send you to prison for 40 years, which is the mandatory sentence for someone dealing drugs with 1,000 feet of a school. And so the landlords, you know, they're not in it for the marijuana, they just kick them out. And so that's been a big issue. So the zoning, really thinking about whether it conflicts with federal law and how it conflicts with federal law. So if Oregon, if the Rules Committee decides 900 feet from a school, but the feds say 1,000, I'd go with 1,000. Because they've shown so far that they're going to go in and go anytime that they think state law is conflicting with federal law, they're going in. So just something to think about. A system for checking in and validating patients. So again, there's a lot of software out there that does this now, where a new patient comes in and then you can go and check with their doctor and validate and make sure that they are who they say they are, and then they become a member of your dispensary. All dispensaries do this. Once you become a member once, you don't have to do it again until you get a new recommendation. So like after a year, you then have to kind of revalidate with your dispensaries. Great staff. I put this on here because I would say Berkeley Patients Group probably has the most diverse staff of any organization I've ever seen. And not just in terms of race, but in terms of age, and in terms of ability, like disability, and more or less abled individuals. I mean, it's really amazing. And the patients love that because it reflects who they are. So they walk into a dispensary, oh, these are people that are just like me, and it makes them feel more comfortable. Patients can have a lot of anxiety about coming to a dispensary for the first time. It's like, I don't want to mess up, I don't want to get in the wrong line, I don't want to like go where I'm not supposed to go. And so, you know, having a great staff that's really, you know, versed on medical marijuana and working with patients is really helpful. I am going to promote Americans for Safe Access, has a great patient training program called Patients First, and they will come out and train staff at dispensaries. And I actually helped develop one of the modules, which is a social work clinical education module that I just adapted for medical cannabis patients. They will also review your laws, with your state laws, with your staff, so they're all aware of what they can do and what they can't do. I recently did a training with them in DC for the new dispensaries, and it was great. So if anyone's interested, ASA has got a great training program for that, and a million lawyers, because everything's gonna change and be really fuzzy, and no one's really gonna know what to do at first, and so you'll need a million lawyers. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the types of dispensaries. So there were kind of 2 types of dispensaries that came out in California when we first started doing this. One was the pharmacy model. So the pharmacy model, if anyone has ever been to Patients Care Collective in Berkeley, it's like that. It's a room, there's no services, it's really just kind of a walk-in with a counter and a desk where they check you in, you get your medicine, and you leave. You know, I call it the pharmacy model because it's like going to Walgreens pharmacy. You wait in line, you get your meds. No one's like, oh, let's go sit over here at Walgreens and chill out for a little bit after we get our drug. No, you get it and you go. And that's what a pharmacy model is like. The social model is something that used to see a lot of in the Bay Area. But since they banned on-site consumption in a lot of places, and because it's hard to find a building that's big enough to have these services that's zoned properly, they've fallen a little bit out of favor, and I think it's too bad, and I'd love to see a model like this revived in Oregon, which is the social model. More like a community center, and has social and recreational services. So I'm not just talking about like the acupuncture and massage, I'm talking about things like bingo night and game night. And because, you know, as you imagine, people who are sick, they like to have fun, right? Just like everyone else. They don't want everything they do to be all about their illness or all about how the fact that they're sick. Sometimes they want to just forget that they have cancer and play bingo. And so dispensaries offering these things there is a really great way to engage people that might otherwise be socially isolated. And as I mentioned, traditionally patients can use on site. I would encourage to think about trying to get vaporization only if people are anti-smoking on site. Spark, which is a great dispensary in San Francisco, is vaporization only. They have volcano vaporizers on site patients can use free of charge, and they just allow smoking. So it's really great because patients can go in there, use the vaporizers, there's no smoking. A lot of patients can't afford a volcano because they run several $100s, and so they're able to use those at the dispensary. So what happens at a dispensary? A lot of folks probably already know this, but again, card verification is very important, making sure that people that access dispensaries are able to access. And then the types of services offered, I kind of went over this already. Health-related, entertainment, very important. Cannabis-related, so something else you see at dispensaries are legal seminars. How do I protect my rights? What do I do if some policeman asks me about my medicine? What do I do if this place gets raided while I'm here? We have raid preparedness training at dispensaries, not just for staff, but for patients too, where we teach them all to say, I'm going to remain silent, I demand to see a lawyer. Like we tell them don't reach for your cell phones if someone comes into raid because they might think you're reaching for a firearm. We give these people information because it's kind of like an earthquake drill. You don't want the first time you think about it to be when it's happening, right? You want to prepare for it so when it happens, you know exactly what to do. So that's also a very important part of it. And then counseling. Peer and individual counseling, I will say what we're starting to see crop up in dispensaries are AA and NA meetings, which I think is fabulous. A lot of my research has been on cannabis use as a substitute for other substances like alcohol or prescription drugs. And so something we noticed was that a lot of patients are in this situation where they found themselves dependent on other substances, they're using cannabis, but they don't want to go to NA or AA because when they talk about their medical cannabis use, they're not really allowed in the group. It's viewed, I mean, AA and NA just recently started allowing psychotropic medication to be used by members. So it's a problem for a lot of our patients because AA and NA are free. So, we want them to be able to access those services. So people started hosting those meetings at dispensaries after hours. And so that way you knew everyone else there also used medical cannabis. It wasn't a big deal. You were able to sit and get the support you needed to not use the other substance while still being able to talk about how cannabis was helping you do that. So we're starting to see a lot of harm reduction groups and things like that at dispensaries as well. So when we look at the patients, service utilization of Berkeley Patients Group, one of the things we used to offer was free food. So we'd have like fruit and all kinds of good organic goodies. And as you can see, like almost a quarter of them said that, yeah, we definitely take advantage of the free food and drink. And we saw a lot of patients who did not have a lot of money taking advantage of free food and drink. And we also had a Helping Hands program that gave care packages of medicine to low-income patients. So we had about 200 of those that went out every week. So that's another really great program, is to have a Helping Hands or a low or free cost medicine program for patients that have no money. People reported that they've used massage, we had live music, and referrals is another great place. So if you think about that you might be the only kind of health type place that some of your patients might be coming to, you can have all these great referrals, like referrals for counseling, referrals for substance use treatment, referrals for employment counseling, referrals for credit counseling, referrals for community college. I mean, you can have a board that has all of these great opportunities for your patients. It's really a great way to get them connected. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to open it up to questions, is probably the thing that everyone wants to know when they're bringing dispensaries in. What's going to happen to my community? I'm so concerned. Well, I will say, so I live in West Oakland, California, and my neighborhood is not the safest, although it's changed a lot since I've lived there. And we actually just had a dispensary open up about 3 blocks down the street. Bloom, B-L-U-M, with a little umlaut over the U. And they're wonderful. They're a wonderful dispensary. And immediately it was like, boom, street light. Boom, guard at the parking lot. Boom, foot traffic in front of the dispensary. And it actually made my neighborhood feel a whole lot safer because there were people around. I mean, really the most dangerous thing is when there's no one around, right? But when you actually have people walking around, you have traffic, you have people talking outside the dispensary, it really made my neighborhood feel a lot safer. So what do we know about this? Well, we know that dispensaries are community-based health and social service centers. That's what we know. We have no reason to think that there's any more risk involved with them than any other community-based health or social service center, except that only certain people can get it. That's really the only difference. Many of the services offered are not covered by insurance and can be free for patients. So that's really helpful to a community, is to provide a service that's not already there to people that could not otherwise access it. It's social support for those with illness, which is hugely important, and it helped us build partnerships with the Berkeley community. So we started working with the Berkeley Chamber of Commerce, and we started donating to the Berkeley Warm Pool, which is a therapeutic pool, and we donated to the Berkeley Library, and we donated to, a youth housing project. So we really started to work with the different other social service agencies in our community and form these amazing partnerships. Where now we're sending patients to the therapeutic pool, and the therapeutic pool is sending patients to BPG, and we're really just helping improve the lives of people where they may not see these connections otherwise. Something to mention is that 43% of the patients say they come to BPG when they don't even get cannabis. So they were coming when cannabis, they weren't even buying cannabis. They were just coming for an event or for a service or to just hang out and talk to the people that they liked in there. And patients said they spend longer at BPG when they don't buy cannabis. So when they're coming just to socialize or just to hang out, they actually end up staying longer. And something that I think is so fascinating, and probably one of my favorite things about dispensaries, is the age issue. So when I was at Berkeley Patients Group, and I would go to the lounge, I would see like a 19-year-old kid talking with like an 80-year-old guy, sharing a joint, talking. Where else do you see that? If they're not related. Where? Movies? No. Restaurants? Concerts? Bars? No. Where do you ever see that kind of generational context for people to interact?
Church.
What did you say?
In church.
In church. In church. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't go outside. But I hear that. That's what I heard. But I think that's another really key piece of the dispensary, is that you're bringing people together that wouldn't necessarily interact otherwise. And that really enriches the lives of your patients, because it opens them up to new experiences and conversations and opportunities that otherwise they may never have gotten. And that was always something I thought was great, and one of the reasons to have an on-site consumption option for patients. All right, so let's look at some research. So as I mentioned, dispensaries are not these big crime magnets that people think they are. In 2010, the Denver Police Department did an analysis and found that dispensaries were robbed at a lower rate than banks, almost half the rate of banks. And then in 2010, LA Police Chief Charlie Beck said, banks are more likely to get robbed than medical marijuana dispensaries. This is the LA Police Chief saying based on his observation. And LA, back in 2010, and certainly today, is much more Wild West than a lot of other dispensary areas. And so then there was actually a research study done on this out of the UCLA School of Public Health in 2012 that looked at the relationship between dispensaries and different types of crime in Los Angeles, and found there was no association between density of medical marijuana dispensaries and either violent or property crime rates. So areas of town, when they control for all the other things that contribute to crime in an area, like the number of abandoned buildings and the economic poverty level, they found that it didn't matter how many dispensaries you had in an area, it did not impact the crime rate. And so they think that this is either because it just isn't related to crime, or because dispensaries are taking measures to reduce crime, like having people at the door, having lights, having a presence. So whichever it is, we don't see that dispensaries are bringing crime into communities. Now again, dispensaries have to be able to have banking, and they have to be able to transport their product and their cash safely. But if that's available to them, it's not a crime risk. And another great thing we see is the impact of dispensaries on use. And I think this is really important because, again, it's a little counterintuitive. People think, oh, well, if a dispensary moves in, there's going to be a lot more marijuana use going on in that area. Or, if we have medical marijuana, people are going to be using marijuana a whole lot more. And we're actually not finding that to be true. So there have been numerous reports, these are just two of them, that show that youth marijuana use actually decreases after a state passes a medical marijuana law. And they've looked at this several times because they're still convinced that this is not the case. They were like, no, this can't be right. This can't be right. But they looked at it multiple times, the most recent report just coming out a few months ago, 2013, and sure enough, When a state becomes a medical marijuana state, we actually see use drop. There was another study done in the Netherlands that found that proximity to coffee shops was not found to be a predictor of marijuana use in either frequency or intensity. So people were not smoking more often or smoking more just because they lived near a coffee shop. And they also were not using harder drugs anymore than people that didn't live near coffee shops. So again, that idea that somehow having access to marijuana is going to lead to more use and access to harder substances, we're not seeing that either. And so there's two reasons we think this is happening. One is that dispensaries further the divide between the illicit and the illicit market, but you're basically shifting the product supply from an unregulated into a regulated environment. So you're not bringing more marijuana, you're just changing where the marijuana is. So before, if the guy was getting marijuana, like in California, I always say, before you just go to Golden Gate Park and get your marijuana, now you go to a dispensary, it's just shifting where it is. Which is now I go to a store versus going to the bridge. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more. Also, moving marijuana into a regulated environment helps separate the markets of marijuana and more harmful substances because dispensaries do not sell harder substances, but people that sell marijuana on an illicit market oftentimes do, or know people that do. And I'm from Chicago originally, and I moved out to California in 2002. And now, okay, granted, part of this is age, but when I lived in Chicago and I was buying marijuana on the illicit market, I could probably get any drug. I knew where to get it. Either the person that sold the marijuana sold it, or he knew someone who sold it. Now, I don't know where to get anything. I know where to get marijuana. I know where to get every strain of marijuana and every marijuana product and every brand that you could possibly imagine. But if someone asked me for a harder substance, I'd be completely lost. I would have no idea. I'd be like, you need oil? So it really does separate those markets, and that's something they've seen in the Netherlands. They have such low rates of harder substance use in the Netherlands, and part of the reason is this separation of markets, because people are able to go and obtain their marijuana from a regulated market. They really have no need to even go to the illicit market. So conclusions. Okay. So dispensaries can be assets to communities. I cannot stress that enough. Dispensaries can be assets to communities. They can make communities stronger, healthier, more appealing to people to move there. They help with local business. I mean, you have a dispensary next door, you put in a coffee shop. It's like a match made in heaven, So you saw that. I mean, Oaksterdam was a great example. So, in that neighborhood of Oakland that they dubbed Oaksterdam, which is now the university there, but it used to be, they called it Oaksterdam because there were a bunch of coffee shops there, like Amsterdam. And that area of town was extremely desolate. There was really nothing there. And then when the coffee shops moved in, all of a sudden there were business, and there was traffic, and there were people outside enjoying themselves and talking, and it really started to revitalize downtown Oakland because of that. So, it really can be an asset. Also, medical marijuana patients are not different from the general population. They have the same needs. They need reliable, safe access to care. We all need that. We all, no matter what our issue is, we all need reliable, safe access to care. And this is no different. Dispensaries can be designed to fit the specific needs of a community. So this is where you get to be creative, right? And you have to think, where do I live? And what is my community like? I will say when I did research in San Francisco for my dissertation, I had 7 dispensaries that were participating, doing surveys. I had 3 that were on the same street, Haight Street, all in different parts of Haight Street. So lower Haight, middle Haight, and upper Haight. All 3 very different communities. If anyone's ever been to San Francisco and knows that the lower Haight is very, very different than the upper Haight, which is very different than Haight and Fillmore, which is kind of in the middle. These 3 dispensaries could not have been more different in terms of their decor, in terms of the music they would play, in terms of the types of edibles they would offer, in terms of who would come there, the services they would offer. They were really tailored to the needs of the people surrounding them. And it was a really great thing because I think in these days of like the healthcare industry, things get whitewashed, for lack of a better word, where it's all stark, it's all the same. Every clinic looks the same, no matter what community you go into. And this is an opportunity to really make your clinics unique to what your community wants. And that's why when I came to Oregon 5 years ago, I was so down on having them do a needs assessment. Because I was like, let's find out what they want from dispensaries. Like, let's find out, do people want to hang out there? Or are they like, no, I just want to get my stuff and go? Like, what do they want? And so this is an important part of bringing a dispensary into your community. And finally, dispensaries are not related to increased crime rates, youth marijuana use and the increased use of marijuana or other drugs. So we just have to stop operating as if that's still a threat, because it's not. And so, you know, we just need to push past that and put in the best, most community-based, social service type facilities. And then people are gonna kind of forget about the marijuana. And they're gonna be like, oh, that's where I go get my acupuncture. Or, oh, are you gonna go to this place on Friday night? They're gonna have open mic, it's gonna be really fun. And that's really what they see it as. And it happens to be a place where you can get marijuana, but that's not the only thing they see. So I think that is one thing the dispensaries can really, really do. So this is my email. If people have any questions, anything at all about marijuana, or dispensaries or research, if you're looking for research articles that, hey, I'd really like to find research on this, I could probably send you something. If you're looking for a survey, if you're like, oh, I would love to do a survey of my community or my patients and find out what they want, I have a survey. I have a survey that's been sampled on over 1,000 patients in the US and Canada. So you can use that survey, and you can even see how your patients compare to this big sample of 1,000 patients. So let me know, I will email you that survey. There's a short version and a long version. You're more than welcome to use either one. And so we have about 15 minutes, so I would like to invite questions. Yes?
You definitely touched on it a lot, but something you can maybe expand a little bit upon who dispensaries can reach out to and ways that they can really be a good neighbor with amongst their community. It seems to me that's really the most important thing about keeping law enforcement from getting involved and not getting complaints from your neighbors.
That's a great point. So yeah, you have to be such a good neighbor. And this means being proactive, basically. So when you move in, I know at Berkeley Patients Group, like we would have a little like nighttime get together for all our neighbors when we moved into our new place. And we invited them all. We said, we'd love to take you on a tour through the dispensary. We want you to see what goes on here. We want to be able to answer all your questions. So we did that right when we moved in. So it wasn't like they found out there was a dispensary there 6 months later and we're like, hey, what is going on in there? We said, hey, we're moving in. We want you to come see our facility. We're going to have a little meet and greet. So be proactive in meeting your neighbors. Also, say, hey, if there's something that you don't like that we're doing, please tell me. You know, make it so you're their first line instead of calling the city or calling the state or, God forbid, the feds. That, you know, say, if there's something we're doing that we can improve upon, if there's a complaint, please tell us and we will take care of it right away. And so that way they know, and give them a person to call. Don't say just call the general number. Say, this is so-and-so. They're the person you want to call if you have this issue. And then make sure so-and-so knows that they're the person that's going to get the phone calls. So I would say that's a great way to integrate yourself with your neighbors. Now in terms of your community, at BPG we had a community picnic. We found a park nearby. We had a community picnic. We bought all this food. We invited all the neighbors in the community to come and bring their kids. We had the local city council members come. And so that was a way for them to meet us, to see that we were there, to ask questions. To see that their city council members supported what we were doing, and here they get to go to this picnic and meet their city council member and learn about the dispensary. So I would say be very proactive and just be really open and transparent. It's difficult because we've been shamed into thinking we're doing something really wrong, but we're not. We're doing something amazing. I mean, we're helping people. It's like you would never tell like a new soup kitchen to like, shh, don't tell me when you're here. Like, no, you'd be like, hey, we have this new soup kitchen and we want to help you. Like, you'd be really open about it. So I think just understanding that what you're providing is great. And so don't let the stigma kind of shy you away from extending that hand. And then if people have complaints, if let's say that you have a neighbor that just really hates you, that really just doesn't like medical marijuana, it happens. No matter what you do, they have a complaint. Have a meeting with them and say, you know, I think it's causing both of us stress to have this ongoing, maybe bring a mediator in, but don't wait and just say, oh, he's just some crazy nut, because you don't want to have to deal with what he might do, or she. So I would say just be really proactive and don't apologize for yourself. You know, you're bringing a great service into the community, and even though there may be stigma around it, I guarantee there are more people that are excited about you coming in there than are upset about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just the people that are upset with us you go here for more.
Well, you said you had to move from where you were on San Pablo Avenue, correct? Now, is that the city of Oakland or is that Berkeley?
It's Berkeley. It's
still
Berkeley.
Okay,
we just moved down the street on San Pablo.
So now here is my question. Around the corner on University, where the Foster Freeze is, which is basically an open-air brothel and narcotics distribution center, now you know where to go. Did they do anything about that, or did they just come after you guys?
Well, it wasn't the city that came after us, it was the federal government.
Oh, it was.
Right, it was the feds that came after us. So the city,
well,
yeah, the city, I mean,
Right.
you know, Berkeley Patients Group has had a license from the city for 12 years. There's a
Okay.
Berkeley Patients Group Day in the city of Berkeley. I mean, the city loves us, it was the feds, and it was
Right.
really just because we were too close to this school.
Right, and that is a very scary, I lived there, that's a very scary part of town.
Yeah, well, I mean, and again, you guys, and I know that like a lot of people want to associate what you guys are doing with like that kind of part of town, which is why that's where dispensaries usually end up going, or in parts of town that are, you know, have other crime issues, because that's a lot of times where they're zoned. I say look at it as an opportunity to make that area of town awesome. You know, just because they say, hey, the only place you can go is this in one place, high crime area with a lot of open air drug dealing. I mean, when we moved into San Pablo, what Berkeley Patients Group did, that area was very much like that too. But after we came and had our lights and our security and our foot traffic, it completely cleared that area out. And we had neighbors that testified that it's actually gotten a lot safer since we had moved in.
Can you elaborate on the different models for testings that you know about in different states? Which one you think works the best? Which ones have failed? The regulations on different testing products acting?
Well, I mean, there's multiple ways to go about testing without getting too like into the nitty-gritty of methods. I mean, you know, you've got like the HPLC and then the liquid chromatography. Between the gas and the liquid chromatography, I've heard liquid's better because the gas might change the content of the plant because there's heat used. But in terms of like guidelines, I would suggest, so are you guys familiar with the American Herbal Products Association? Yeah. Okay. So they basically develop guidelines for the cultivation, testing, labeling, and distribution of all herbal products that are not regulated by the FDA. So anything you see in Whole Foods that says this has not been evaluated by the FDA, that is regulated by the American Herbal Products Association. So something they did a few years ago was start this cannabis committee with the goal of developing regulations around the cultivation, testing, packaging, labeling, and distribution of cannabis that are in line with how we regulate other botanical products. So the testing guidelines are done. I actually did send the testing guidelines and the distribution guidelines to Oregon, to the medical marijuana program. I think I probably need to do that again. So there are guidelines out there, and these are really based on how we test other botanical supplements. So if you want to give me your card, I'm happy to send them to you so you can take a look and see what they say. But again, basically, you know, testing is really variable because the technology is so variable in different states in terms of what people have been able to get to, that we don't want to do a blanket requirement that's going to shove a bunch of people out that just haven't gotten there yet. So we really focus on safety. So like we want people to know how much THC is in something because we don't want them to over-medicate themselves, and we want to make sure they're not smoking anything that could be harmful to them. So that's really the basics. That's like the bare minimum. Now luckily, we haven't had testing. People have been smoking cannabis for 5,000 years. We've only had testing very recently, and we don't see a history of people getting very seriously ill or dying from tainted cannabis. So we're lucky in that way. So I think the testing has time to come on board in a way that doesn't have to be like all or nothing tomorrow, but that we should take our time with it and make sure that we're not over-regulating. Like we need to make sure there's a there before we start making all of these requirements for testing.
Have you seen that happen in certain states?
Not yet. I've heard it more just in conversations. I mean, Colorado, it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, how that plays out with the testing. In California, you know, we're considering mandatory testing as well, but again, just around potency and purity. So I think that's going to be an industry that's we're going to see more attention to paid in the future. But right now, it's still kind of like an add-on. It's not looked at as a requirement necessarily.
I wonder if you see any opportunities for doing scientific research based on the tracking that's required by 3460. Because it basically says that you know, all marijuana in and out of dispensaries must be tracked. So we're going to theoretically know, okay, this patient, you know, bought so much of, you know, it doesn't say what strain, but could we add on a layer where strains are being tracked and patients are being asked, did it work or not?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, having a large population to evaluate the efficacy of strains and different formulations. And
yeah, that's one of the most exciting things about this. And I was talking to Jeremy about this before lunch. I have a friend, Philippe Lucas, some of you might know him, he's up in Canada, and he has the Vancouver Island Compassion Society. And he's been using point of sale data to do research for years, where he is looking at his data and saying, all right, what are HIV patients buying? What are MS patients buying? And are they buying things that are different than other people and more like the other people that have these conditions? And then they're able to take, so let's say that we find that HIV patients love things with blue in the title. The strains that have blue in the title, you know, Blue Haze, Blue Dream, we find that HIV patients really seem to like. We then take those strains to the lab and we say, what is it about this collection of strains that's making it be so helpful? Like, what is it? Is it our common terpenoid profile? Is there some other cannabinoid in these that we don't usually see in other ones? So you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that formalization of this does is it enables us to really get a hard look at who's obtaining cannabis, whether it's working for them. I mean, you can definitely, you know, get a sample of patients and ask them if they'll fill out a survey, you know, keep a journal. You know, I always tell new patients to keep a journal anyway, so they know what strains work best for them. So there's definitely a way to utilize this. I think it's one of the more promising things about kind of getting dispensaries formalized in this way.
I had a question just on addressing or any actions you found specifically around consideration versus reimbursement in this case. Then the 280 ruling, and you touched on, of course, everything around the word money, right? You know, basically is that has a whole ball, and I didn't know if there's any specific to it, you know, in our law or any specific coaching yet.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and we were talking about this at lunch, one of the big issues with money has to do with the federal law and the inability to file as a 501c3. So even though these dispensaries, for all intents and purposes, are operating as nonprofits, they're offering free services to people. In California, you're not allowed to make a profit at a dispensary. So they're basically operating as nonprofits, but because they're illegal under federal law, because federal law does not recognize them, they cannot file federal 501c3 status, which means they cannot take deductions. So they have to pay as if they're making a profit. They have to pay taxes as if they're making a profit, even though they're not allowed to make a profit above and beyond what it costs to operate their facility and pay the salaries. So it's a problem. One of the big problems is this conflict between whether you're forced into nonprofit status but can't technically be one. So I would say in Oregon, you either have to let them be for-profit. I mean, you either have to let them make enough money to pay their taxes, or you have to finagle something where they can claim nonprofit status and get some kind of deduction. Because to get hit with a tax bill when you haven't been able to collect any profit is pretty much a killer. So you can't be both ways.
Or donate to a nonprofit research organization.
Excuse me?
Or donate to a nonprofit 501c3
Right.
health and research organization.
Right. So it's tricky. I mean, you know, no one wants dispensaries to make any money. No one wants anyone to make any money off marijuana. But at the same time, it's very expensive to run a dispensary. So it's something that has to be worked out, and it's something that the Rules Committee is really going to have to think about. If we put this restriction in place for how much dispensaries can make or whether they can make a profit, we have to allow them to deduct. Or else you're not going to have anybody do services. Like, why would I take an extra 50 square feet of space to provide free massage if I just have to pay taxes on that space? And I can't deduct for the fact that I'm offering free massage. So that's, you know, if you really force people to pay taxes without allowing them to take deductions, you force them out of this kind of social model and into a very small space where they have very few staff and they don't really offer these peripheral services.
How have cities reacted to the Riverside decision that confirms cities can prohibit dispensaries in their city if they want to? Have you seen more cities doing that?
You know, we haven't really seen more do that since the decision. It really just kind of solidified that cities had done it, could do it. So for those of you that are unaware, in California we had a case where they were questioning whether or not localities have the right to regulate their own dispensaries, including banning them. And it was ruled that they can. Now, on one hand, this was good, because that meant that cities could actually make dispensaries and have them if they wanted. But on the other hand, it meant that if you didn't want them, you could ban them. And so about 200 localities in California have banned dispensaries. Now, trying to get the state level medical marijuana regulation up and running in California, we're hopeful that if the state actually does something to help, that some of these localities will reverse their decisions, because we feel that a lot of localities banned because they were overwhelmed by the idea of regulating without the state helping. But if the state says, hey, we're going to get the licenses, we're going to do all the oversight, you just basically have to zone, I think more localities will decide to do it. I don't think it's because they hate medical marijuana in most cases. I think it's because they hate the idea of regulating by themselves. And I don't blame them. And they don't have to do it with alcohol. The state helps.
You mentioned the banking and the armored car thing. Wasn't that something that came up and then was retracted?
Well, no, that was in the DOJ memo. Originally, there was something in the DOJ memo that was released last week that addressed the banking, and that was retracted. But the banking issue still stands. You know, it's very hard to find a bank to work with. In California, we've gone a lot to working with credit unions. And there was actually a discussion about forming a credit union in California just for medical marijuana businesses. We were like, oh God, that wouldn't be a target for the feds or anything. They'd just be like, oh, they all put their money in one place. Now we just have to go to that one place and take it all. So I don't think they're gonna do that. But so yes, that's still an issue. And then just recently, the feds started discouraging armored car services from working with dispensaries. So again, if they're saying on the one hand, we will not interfere as long as public safety is not put at risk, but having a cash-only business and carrying around a bunch of marijuana and money in a non-armored car is a safety risk. So again, I think, you know, just as we're going to wrap up, but I will say that tomorrow is the very first federal hearing ever on the conflict between state and federal marijuana law. It was brought by Senator Leahy from Vermont, and it's going to start tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's going to be on streaming, so you can watch it. And this is the first one they've ever had. So these issues like the banking and the nonprofit status, this is what I'm hoping is going to be discussed in this hearing. How do we reconcile these states that are trying to regulate, given that it's illegal federally? So watch out for that tomorrow at 11. It should be very interesting. One more question.
Well, I just want to know, when you say streaming, is it going to be on C-SPAN?
Yes.
Or is it
Yes.
right on C-SPAN?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. For me while I'm here, I always appreciate that. And for those of you that are interested, I wanted to let you know that Drug Policy Alliance is having our international conference in Denver, October 23rd through the 26th. So if you're interested in that, it's an amazing conference. Thousands of people are there. There's great panels, a lot on marijuana, but also on other drugs. You can email me, or you can go to our website, which is drugpolicy.org, and register if you're interested. But it's a really great conference. And Patients Out of Time, one last plug for the Patients Out of Time conference, which is going to be here in Portland in May. And if anyone, that's the Cannabis Therapeutics Conference. If you're interested in the science behind this, it is a do not miss opportunity. It's the one marijuana conference that really brings the most amazing scientists from all over the world to talk about the very latest in marijuana research, and it's going to be here in Portland. So I'm sure Todd will give more information about that.
If people want to help, because we need a lot of help, have them contact Todd and me. We're all helping people get May 8th through 10th.
All right, so contact Todd and Sandy if anyone's interested in helping with that event. It is phenomenal. It's my favorite conference every year by far. So thank you guys again. I appreciate
it. We're going to bring the committee back up to the front, and we have a public comment. We've got a number of people signed up to speak, so stick around, and it's our turn to listen to you. And so we'll be resuming in about 2 minutes. Sandy wants a picture.
Oh, yeah. My daughter took
So now, Jess. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate your help.
I'm interested in helping on the committee.
Yeah, this Friday I'm going to be in Phoenix.
Yeah, I'll do that. Anything you want me to do?
I know, I told you I'm going to be on the airboat. And I'm on the airplane. That's the one airplane I have.
Okay, we're going to resume the meeting now that we're back together. We're going to have a public comment period for the remainder of the meeting until 2:30. We've got 10 people on the list, so that means about 2 to 3, about 2 minutes, maybe 3 if what you're saying is really important. And so we're going to start with Larry Aday with Jenny Priest on deck. Larry Aday?
See Larry. Must have stepped out.
Okay, how about Jenny or Jeremy Priest?
Jerry's out.
Jerry is out? Okay. Then it's Jeremy Sackett with David Klein on deck.
I just wanted to say thank you to the committee members and the staff and everybody in attendance for your work for our communities. Thank you.
And I want to thank Jeremy, who has contributed towards the Horticulture Safety, Research and Safety Committee's recommendations for lab testing standards. So thank you, Jeremy, for that. David Klein with Jerry Reynolds on deck. Okay. Jerry Reynolds. Okay. Michael Kravitz with Jeremy Quitt on deck.
From here, present. Mike Kravitz, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. I just wanted to thank everyone for working so hard to add post-traumatic stress to the state law. That's a really important one for us. We're really glad that you mentioned about the statistics, because we're going to be very keen in the statistics coming out of especially if we see any movement from chronic pain over post-traumatic stress. We're going to be keenly interested in that. So we're working to we've enlisted the help of the Veterans Department of the Oregon Department of Veterans Services and Veterans Affairs to try to get them to help implement that and get the word out about post-traumatic stress and cannabis, at least in so much as why the law was passed and what the reasoning was for why this was important. Not so much thinking that they're going to be pitching medical cannabis and its efficacy, but certainly I think that it's reasonable to ask the state to help reach out and make sure people understand the law and what it means. So if there's anybody interested in helping us help you implement this new edition of the law, please do reach out to me. I'm easy to reach, and looking forward to seeing what we can come up with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to inform everybody here, recently I've gotten some calls from veterans who have been VA patients for years. They've been very upfront about medical marijuana. They haven't had any trouble with their meds, and all of a sudden within the last month, I'm getting calls from people who are suddenly being cut off without notice from opiates, and because of medical marijuana. And I'm very concerned about this. I brought it up to Michael. Michael said, if you hear this, have them get a hold of me. And so I just want to tell everybody, as you're running across these people, they're all of a sudden just popping up. Something's different, and he might be the man that can help them. So if you could somehow leave your information so people, or get a hold of me and I know how to get a hold of him, because this is something new and something really serious.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a trend, but I did have one person, but I keep your letter on my bulletin board that the VA wrote to you. And,
Dr. Petzl's letter.
yeah, and so I always make a photocopy of that and say, here, take this to him and show him.
Yeah, things have
shows
changed.
you that, yeah.
Very good. Yeah, thank you for your work, Michael. Appreciate it. Jeremy Quitt.
I also wanted just to say thank you to the patients, activists, and stakeholders for making their contributions to the ACMM.
Thank you. Julie Draper with Roger Tower on deck. Is Julie here?
Yeah, I have
just my first meeting, and it's nice to be here. It's very edifying.
Thank you, Julie. How about Roger Tower?
Yeah, I thought that was just an attendance thing. I was signing in.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. All right, I'm going to just go through the other names. Did Larry Day come back?
Not yet.
Okay. Jenny or Jeremy Priest, David Klein, Jerry Reynolds, PK.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad that we can get this out on the air and on the internet. Let the people see we're trying to do something.
Yes, thank you.
And PK will be putting this on online, YouTube, Mercy Center's YouTube channel.
Yep.
How long will that be about?
Couple of days.
Couple days, great. So if welcome to. Any last comments from anyone?
I forgot to sign in, but while I'm here, I'd like to thank Juana and her staff. Those people are the best.
Yes.
And a lot of people will send in stuff and it'll be wrong and they'll hold their money and hold it until they get the things right and they just knock them out every time. It's awesome.
All right. Good. And once again, thank Amanda Reiman for coming up here and giving us a great presentation. I think that was, great not only to help make policy decisions, but also to help people who are operating dispensaries. And incredible. So, with no further business, this meeting of the ACMM is concluded.
You want to say anything before I turn it off, Glenn?
Yes, good night.
Good night. God bless you all, every single one of you.